Hello guys, welcome to Ben 10 What Ifs. So in this video, we will see, what if Ben 10 was reborn as alien emperor and claimed the harem of Attea, Princess Looma, Xylene, Eunice and Myaxx. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. Rebirth of a Hero. The universe burned. Reality itself fractured as dimensional walls collapsed inward, the multiverse folding like origami in the hands of a destructive child. Ben Tennyson, 26 years old and bearing scars both visible and hidden, stood at the epicenter of catastrophe. The Omnitrix on his wrist sparked and sputtered, damaged beyond any previous breakdown. "You can't stop this, Benjamin," Maltruant's voice echoed across the disintegrating battlefield. The Chronosapien's clockwork body glowed with stolen temporal energy. "The Annihilarg was merely a prelude. My chronological singularity will unmake and remake all realities in my image." Ben's laugh was hollow, edged with the weariness of someone who had fought too long. "Funny thing about remaking reality," he said, fingers hovering over the Omnitrix's damaged core. "Somebody always shows up to wreck your plans." Around him lay his fallen allies, Rook, motionless with his proto-tool shattered beside him, Gwen, her mana shields finally exhausted, Kevin, half-transformed and unconscious. The cost had been too high already, and the dimensional collapse was accelerating. "There's nowhere left to run, Ben Tennyson." Maltruant's mechanical body expanded, drawing in more temporal energy. "No aliens left to save you. The Omnitrix is broken beyond repair. I don't need it to work perfectly," Ben replied, his voice suddenly calm. "I just need it to work once more." He slammed his palm down on the Omnitrix. Instead of the familiar flash of transformation, the device emitted a high-pitched whine. Green energy patterns spread across Ben's skin like lightning, his DNA being rewritten in ways he'd never experienced before. "What have you done?" Maltruant's mechanical voice actually registered shock. Azimuth called it the Terminus Protocol. Ben gasped through the pain of molecular reconstruction. "Last resort. The Omnitrix is converting my consciousness into pure information. Storing my essence. Impossible." Maltruant reached for him, time slowing around them. No human could survive such a process. Ben's body began to dissolve into particles of green light, each containing fragments of his consciousness, memories, and the genetic codes of 10,000 alien species. "Who said anything about surviving?" Ben's voice echoed as his physical form disintegrated. "The Omnitrix was designed to preserve life across the universe. Seems fitting that, in the end, it preserves just one." The release of energy created a counterwave to Maltruant's temporal singularity. As Ben's consciousness scattered across dimensional space, the last thing he heard was Maltruant's scream of denial as the Chronosapien was pulled into his own collapsing reality well. Then darkness, silence, the void between moments, and finally, after what could have been seconds or centuries, sensation. Pain came first, sharp and insistent along his spine. Then sound, the hiss of energy weapons, shouted commands in a language that felt simultaneously foreign and familiar. The bitter taste of metal and blood filled his mouth. Light flooded his vision, disorienting and painful. "The Emperor is conscious. Secure the perimeter." Emperor. The thought formed sluggishly in his mind. "I'm not an emperor. I'm Ben Tennyson. The memories crashed over him like a tsunami. The final battle, the Terminus Protocol, the dissolution of his physical form. But these memories collided with others, memories that weren't his. A life lived on distant worlds. The burden of rule, the Nexus Dominion and its 1,000 tributary worlds. He tried to move and found his body responding strangely, muscles contracting with unexpected strength. His skin felt wrong, too dense, too resilient. When he finally managed to focus his vision, he saw his own hand splayed against polished obsidian floor. A hand with subtle blue-gray skin, intricate pattern. Of bioluminescent circuitry pulsing beneath the surface. Not his hand. Not Ben Tennyson's hand. "Your Imperial Majesty," a voice called urgently. "The assassins have breached the inner sanctum. We must move you immediately." He turned toward the voice, movements clumsy as he adjusted to this unfamiliar body. A towering figure in crystalline armor stood protectively over him, six-limbed and insectoid. yet moving with military precision. Who? His voice emerged as a resonant baritone, nothing like his own. Who am I? The guard's compound eyes registered confusion. Sire, you are Emperor Decimus of the Nexus Dominion, sovereign of the Thousand Worlds, keeper of the cosmic concordat. Are you injured? Another explosion rocked the chamber, closer this time. Through the haze of confusion, MBAT instincts kicked in, instincts honed through years of fighting as Ben 10, now merging with the muscle memory of this new body. Help me up, he commanded, surprised at the authority in his borrowed voice. The guard obeyed, helping him to his feet, feet that stood 8 feet tall in a body of lean, powerful muscle beneath ceremonial armor. As he straightened, fragments of the situation assembled themselves in his mind. He was in an imperial palace of some kind, under attack. He was called Decimus here. And somehow, impossibly, the consciousness of Ben Tennyson had been reborn in this alien body. Status report, he demanded. The words coming automatically. Assassination squad breached the palace defenses 20 minutes ago, the guard reported. Elite commandos, species unknown, but employing Inkersine tactics. They've disabled the central defense grid and the massive doors at the far end of the chamber exploded inward, sending fragments of metal and stone flying across the room. Ben, no, Decimus now, reacted with inhuman speed, pulling the guard behind a pillar as energy blasts strafed the position they'd just occupied. Through the smoke stepped a figure he recognized instantly. Despite the centuries that must have passed, Attea, the name escaped him before he could stop it. The Inkersine princess, now visibly older, battle-scarred, with a cybernetic enhancement where one eye should be, paused momentarily. Her tongue flicked out, tasting the air, before her mouth twisted into a familiar arrogant smirk. So the rumors are true, she said, her voice harsher than he remembered. Emperor Decimus knows things he shouldn't know. She leveled a weapon at his head, a compact energy cannon that hummed with deadly potential. Interesting final words to choose, croaking out my name like we're old friends. Decimus felt his new body responding to the threat, muscles tensing, senses sharpening. Power coursed through him, not the familiar transformative energy of the Omnitrix, but something more integrated. As if parts of his alien catalog had been permanently merged into this form's biology. We are old friends, he replied, stepping forward despite the guard's alarmed protest. Or at least, we were. In another life. Attea's finger tightened on the trigger. I don't have friends, especially not among the imperial bloodline that helped destroy my father's empire. The memories of Decimus provided context. The Inkersine Empire had collapsed decades ago, torn apart by internal conflicts after failed expansion efforts. The Nexus Dominion had apparently played some role in its downfall. Your father was Emperor Milius, Decimus said, watching recognition flicker across Attea's face. You were General Attea, Princess, Scion, and Teen Supreme of the deathless Inkersine Empire. He took another step forward. And you once tried to force me to marry you by threatening to destroy the Earth. The energy cannon wavered. Impossible, Attea hissed. That was Ben Tennyson, he finished for her. Wielder of the Omnitrix. The guy who turned into aliens and stopped you from conquering half the galaxy. The chamber fell silent except for the distant sounds of combat elsewhere in the palace. Attea's cybernetic eye whirred as it focused, scanning him. Ben Tennyson died centuries ago, she finally said, though uncertainty had crept into her voice. He sacrificed himself to stop the Chronosapian Maltruant from collapsing reality. I remember, Decimus said quietly. I was there. Before Attea could respond, more explosions rocked the palace. A section of ceiling collapsed behind them, forcing both Decimus and Attea to dive in opposite directions. Through the newly created opening, a massive red-skinned figure dropped into the chamber with earth-shaking IM. Pact, a female Tetraman warrior in elaborate battle armor adorned with the insignia of the Red Wind clan. Emperor Decimus. The Tetraman bellowed, all 4 arms brandishing different weapons. I am Princess Looma Red Wind, and I challenge you by ancient right to combat for the throne of the Nexus Dominion. Decimus stared in disbelief at the second familiar face from his past. Looma looked much as he remembered, proud, fierce, and absolutely convinced of her own righteousness. The only differences were subtle scars across her face and more elaborate armor befitting her royal status. Perfect timing, Attea muttered sarcastically. Rolling to her feet. Always count on a Tetraman to make a dramatic entrance in the middle of someone else's assassination. Looma turned her 4 eyes toward Attea. Incursine filth. This is a matter of honor between royalty. Your petty vendetta can wait. Ladies, Decimus interrupted, his mind racing to process this impossible situation. I appreciate you both traveling so far to see me. But perhaps we could discuss this when we're not under attack. As if to punctuate his point, a squad of armored soldiers burst through a side entrance, weapons aimed at all 3 of them. Leading them was a tall, slender figure in a laboratory coat worn over lightweight battle armor. Emperor, we must evacuate immediately, the newcomer called out. The Palace de Fenzes. She stopped abruptly upon seeing Attea and Looma. Well, this explains much. Despite the chaos, Decimus recognized her instantly. Myaxx. The Chimera sui generis scientist's eyes narrowed in surprise. How do you know my name, Emperor? We have not been formally introduced since my appointment to the Imperial Science Division. Before Decimus could respond, Attea fired a blast from H.R. cannon at the ceiling above the soldiers, bringing down more debris. Looma used the distraction to charge directly at Decimus, her lower right arm swinging a massive war hammer. Acting on instinct, Decimus felt his body respond with abilities he'd never possessed as a human. He moved with incredible speed, sidestepping Looma's attack while simultaneously catching her arm and using her momentum to flip her massive body over his shoulder. The move would have been impossible for Ben Tennyson, but this new body performed it effortlessly. Looma crashed into the floor with a surprised grunt. Impressive, she acknowledged, quickly regaining her feet. The reports of your combat prowess were not exaggerated. Emperor, Myaxx called urgently, the palace's structural integrity is compromised. We must reach the secure transport bay. Quote, Decimus assessed the situation with newfound clarity. 3 women from his past, all now potential threats, and a palace under attack. Whatever had happened to bring Ben Tennyson's consciousness here, he needed to stabilize the situation before seeking answers. Princess Looma, he addressed the Tetraman formally, I accept your challenge, but by ancient Tetraman law. Such challenges must be issued in times of peace, not during an assassination attempt. Looma hesitated, honor clearly warring with opportunity. And Attea, he continued, turning to the Incursine. If you wanted a diplomatic audience, there are less explosive ways to arrange one. Attea's tongue flicked out in what might have been amusement. Where's the fun in that? Another explosion, closer this time. The guard who had been protecting Decimus earlier called out, Sire, hostile forces are converging on this position. Making a split-second decision, Decimus adopted the Commandant G presence that seemed to come naturally to this body. Myaxx, led us to the transport bay. Looma, if you truly believe in Tetraman honor, help us repel these attackers, and I swear I'll grant you why. Our challenge once the palace is secured. And why should I help you? Attea demanded, though she'd already shifted her cannon to cover the main entrance. Because if I die to someone other than you, you'll never know if I really am who I claim to be, Decimus answered simply. And I know you're curious. Attea's smirk returned. Fine. But this changes nothing. Emperor, this is highly irregular. Myaxx began to protest. So is waking up with someone else's memories in my head, Decimus replied quietly. Lead the way, Myaxx. We'll talk science later. The scientist's eyes widened at that. Bu. She nodded and gestured toward a concealed doorway. This way. The emergency transport system remains operational. As they moved through the palace corridors, Decimus had his first opportunity to truly observe his surroundings. The architecture was breathtaking. Soaring arches of material that resembled both metal and crystal, supporting ceilings that displayed what appeared to be real-time views of space. The designs incorporated elements from dozens of alien cultures he recognized, yet blended into something entirely new. Their unusual group, Emperor, Scientist, Assassin, and Challenger, GHT their way through several skirmishes with masked attackers. Decimus found himself instinctively using abilities that must be native to his new form. Enhanced strength and speed, limited energy projection from his palms, and what seemed to be natural shielding capabilities. During a momentary lull in the fighting, Myaxx approached him cautiously. Your fighting style has changed, Emperor. And you recognized me. How? It's complicated. Decimus replied, checking a minor wound on his arm that was already healing at an accelerated rate. I appear to have memories that aren't mine. Or perhaps they are mine. Just from a very different time. Fascinating, Myaxx murmured, her scientist's curiosity momentarily overriding concern. The temporal anomalies detected in your brain patterns during your last medical examination might explain. Less talking, more moving, Attea interrupted, covering their rear position. Unless you want to explain your theories to the next wave of assassins. Hay continued through increasingly damaged sections of the palace. Decimus noticed that despite their stated enmity, both Looma and Attea fought with remarkable effectiveness alongside him. Looma's straight-forward power complemented Attea's acrobatic precision, while Decimus found himself naturally coordinating their efforts. The transport bay is ahead, Myaxx announced as they reached a massive sealed doorway. It will take a moment to override the lockdown protocols. Make it quick, Looma warned, hefting her war hammer. More hostiles approaching from the east corridor. While Myaxx worked on the door controls, Decimus turned to face their pursuers alongside Looma and Attea. As they prepared for combat, he seized the opportunity to gather information. So, Attea, he said casually, as if they weren't waiting for an attack. What happened to the Incursine Empire after your father? Attea's cybernetic eye whirred as she gave him a sidelong glance. It fell apart. Civil war. External pressure from the Nexus Dominion. The usual. Her voice remained casual, but Decimus caught the underlying bitterness. I led what remained until a coup forced me into exile 50 years ago. 50 years. Decimus couldn't hide his surprise. You look, well, older than I remember, but not that old. Incursine royal genetic modifications, she replied with a hint of pride. Extended lifespan, enhanced reflexes. Plus, I'm too stubborn to die. And you, Princess Looma? Decimus asked, turning to the Tetraman. Last I knew, you were betrothed to Kevin Levin. Looma snorted. That arrangement ended when he died of old age 2 centuries ago. The Red Wind clan has since led the Reformation movement among the Tetraman systems, challenging the old patriarchal structures. She fixed her 4 eyes on him. Which is why your continued denial of our petition for full representation in the Dominion Senate cannot stand. I've denied your petition. Decimus frowned, another piece of the puzzle slotting into place. Apparently, Emperor Decimus wasn't particularly progressive regarding Tetraman rights. Before he could respond further, Myaxx called out, door override complete. The massive portal slid open to reveal a vast hangar containing various spacecraft, from small shuttles to what appeared to be an imperial yacht gleaming with the same blue-gray metal as the palace architecture. Unfortunately, the hangar was also occupied by a dozen more armed attackers, already taking up defensive positions. Ambush, Attea hissed, dropping into a combat stance. The lead attacker stepped forward, a tall, humanoid figure encased in shifting, clock-like armor. When it spoke, its voice resonated with mechanical precision. Emperor Decimus, your anomalous existence threatens the proper flow of time. The Chronos Collective has deemed you a temporal aberration that must be eliminated. Decimus felt a chill at the familiar design elements in the armor, reminiscent of Maltruant's own clockwork body. The Chronos Collective, what exactly is that? The armored figure tilted its head. You know less than we feared. Nevertheless, your destruction is necessary for chronological stability. I've heard similar threats before. Decimus replied, stepping protectively in front of the others. Never works out well for time-traveling fanatics. Without warning, the armored attackers fired in unison. Energy blasts converging on Decimus's position. Instinctively, he threw up his hands, and to his surprise, a shimmering energy shield materialized around their group. The attacks dissipated harmlessly against it. Imperial defensive capabilities activated, an automated voice announced from somewhere within Decimus's armor. Biometric identification confirmed. Combat systems online. His armor began to transform. Components shifting and extending to cover more of his body while enhancing his already considerable abilities. Information flowed through his mind. Tactical data, weapon systems, energy levels, all integrated directly into his consciousness. Now that's more like it, Decimus murmured, the sensation eerily reminiscent of his old Omnitrix transformations. Looma laughed, a warrior's appreciation in her voice. Perhaps you will prove worthy competition after all, Emperor. Less admiring, more fighting, Attea countered, already firing precisely targeted shots through gaps in Decimus's shield. The battle that followed was unlike anything Ben had experienced even in his most intense confrontations. His new body moved with preternatural grace and power, while his mind processed combat data with machine-like efficiency. Looma fought like a force of nature, her forearms wielding different weapons simultaneously as she crashed through enemy lines. Attea was all precision and speed, her shots finding vulnerabilities with unerring accuracy. Even Myaxx proved surprisingly capable, producing compact scientific devices from her coat that disrupted the Attea's weapons and armor systems. As they fought their way to the Imperial yacht, Decimus realized something was happening to him internally. Each combat movement seemed to unlock more memories, not Ben's memories but Decimus's. The political structure of the Nexus Dominion. The ongoing Cold War with neighboring stellar empires. The experimental technology that made his unique physiology possible. Most importantly, he began to understand how Ben Tennyson's consciousness had ended up here. The Terminus Protocol hadn't just preserved his mind, it had scattered fragments of his being across space-time, seeds of consciousness waiting for the right vessel. Somehow, Emperor Decimus had become that vessel. The leader of the Chronos Collective confronted him directly as they neared the yacht, temporal energy distorting space around them. Your interference in the timeline ends here, Ben Tennyson, it said, using his original name. Your consciousness should have been dispersed into the void, not reborn centuries later. Decimus blocked the attacker's chronologically phased blade with his armored forearm. I'm getting really tired of people telling me what should or shouldn't have happened to me, he growled. His voice deepening as his armor responded to his anger. I didn't ask to be reborn, but now that I'm here, I'm not going anywhere. With a surge of power he didn't fully understand, Decimus channeled energy through his armor and into a concentrated blast that sent the attacker flying backward into its companions. Emperor, Myaxx called from the yacht's entrance ramp. The engines are primed. Decimus backed toward the vessel, maintaining his shield as Looma and Attea boarded ahead of him. Just before entering, he paused to address the Chronos Collective. Tell your leadership that Emperor Decimus sends a message. The Nexus Dominion is under my protection now. Come after me or my people again, and you'll learn why even Maltruant feared Ben Tennyson. The yacht's engines roared to life as Decimus sealed the entrance behind him. As they ascended through an opening in the hangar ceiling, he got his first view of the world he now apparently ruled. A breathtaking metropolis spread beneath them, architecture seamlessly blending with natural formations on a scale that made Earth's greatest cities seem primitive by comparison. Multiple suns cast overlapping shadows across structures that defied conventional physics, while vehicles of countless designs moved through elaborate transit systems above and below ground. Imperial Capital Nexus Prime, Myaxx said, noting his attention. The crown jewel of the Dominion. It's beautiful, Decimus murmured, genuinely awestruck. And vulnerable, Attea added pragmatically, checking her weapons. Your palace security was pathetic. I could Avenue killed you 3 different ways before the alarms even triggered. Yet you didn't, Decimus observed, turning to face her. Why come in person for an assassination you didn't complete? Attea's cybernetic eye word as she studied him. Reconnaissance. The rumors about Emperor Decimus suddenly changing his policies, exhibiting new abilities, and accessing knowledge he shouldn't possess. I needed to see for myself. And, Decimus prompted. And now I'm even more confused, she admitted reluctantly. No one has mentioned Ben Tennyson's name in over 2 centuries, yet you know details only he would know. The same applies to you, Emperor, Looma interjected, securing her weapons but maintaining a ready stance. Your combat style has changed. You fought alongside us rather than NDING from safety as you've always done before. Myaxx, who had been monitoring the yacht's systems, joined the conversation. The biometric scans confirm it's the Emperor's body, but brain activity patterns show significant anomalies compared to your last medical examination. Decimus sighed, making a decision. These 3 women from his past life might be his best hope for understanding his situation, and surviving whatever came next. I believe I am both Emperor Decimus and Ben Tennyson, he explained, removing his helmet to reveal features that combined human characteristics with alien physiology. Solid green eyes reminiscent of his old transformations, skin with subtle patterns flowing beneath the surface. When I used the Terminus protocol to stop Maltruant, my consciousness was preserved within the Omnitrix's database. Scattered across space-time, somehow, I've ended up here, centuries later, in this body. Preposterous, Looma declared, though without conviction. Actually, Myaxx said thoughtfully, it's not entirely implausible. The Emperor's unique physiological condition, the hybridized DNA structure that gives him his abilities, could theoretically serve as a receptor for a consciousness pattern preserved in the manner you describe. In simple terms, Decimus translated, I'm like an alien smoothie, and that made me compatible with Ben's backup file. Attea's tongue licked out in what might have been amusement. You even joke like him. Terribly. The question remains, Myaxx continued, why now? What triggered the integration of this consciousness after all this time? Before anyone could theorize further, the yacht's communication system chimed urgently. A holographic display materialized in the center of the cabin, showing a severe-looking alien with features suggesting a relation to the Galvan. Though considerably taller and with more pronounced cranial development. Emperor, the figure began without preamble, the Privy Council awaits your arrival at the contingency citadel. The assassination attempt has destabilized the Rimward provinces. 3 governors have already declared independence, citing the succession crisis clause in the Dominion Charter. Decimus felt Decimus's memories providing context. The Nexus Dominion had been fracturing for decades, its 1,000 worlds reduced to barely 200 loyal systems. His apparent death would be the perfect excuse for ambitious governors to break away completely. Counselor Albedo, Decimus acknowledged, the name coming automatically from his merged memories. I'm en route. Prepare the council for emergency session. The Galvan-like alien's eyes narrowed as he noticed the others in the cabin. Emperor, you appear to be in the company of unexpected guests. Special envoys, Decimus improvised. Princess Attea of the Inkerseen Remnant and Princess Looma of the Tetraman Reformation. They assisted in repelling the assassination attempt. How fortunate, Albedo replied, skepticism evident. The council will be most interested in hearing their diplomatic proposals. After the communication ended, Attea rounded on Decimus. Special envoys, I came to kill you, not negotiate. Did you? Decimus challenged. Because it seems to me you had plenty of opportunities and didn't take them. Perhaps you're more interested in what I can offer the Inkerseen Remnant as an ally rather than an enemy. Attea's expression remained neutral, but her lack of immediate denial spoke volumes. And you, Princess Looma, Decimus continued. You claim to want combat for the throne, but why? Oh, you really want is justice for your people. What if I could offer that without bloodshed? Looma crossed her lower arms stubbornly. Tetraman tradition demands. Tradition is important, Decimus interrupted gently. But so is progress. Didn't you say your clan leads the Reformation movement? Sometimes the greatest honor comes in knowing when to adapt tradition to serve your people better. The Tetraman princess fell silent. Considering his words, you're playing a dangerous game, Emperor, Myaxx warned quietly. The Privy Council already questions your recent policy shifts. Appearing with TWO potential enemies as special envoys will only fuel their suspicions. Then we'll have to give them something more important to worry about, Decimus replied, an idea forming. Myaxx, you're the imperial scientist. What's the most pressing technological or scientific crisis facing the Dominion right now? Myaxx didn't hesitate. The dimensional anomalies in the void sector. 17 worlds have reported temporal disturbances, gravitational inversions, and matter transmutation events in the past month alone. The Council has been demanding solutions, but previous investigation teams haven't returned. And let me guess, Decimus said, memories of both lives aligning. These anomalies began appearing shortly before Emperor Decimus, before I started exhibiting changes in behavior and abilities. Precisely, Myaxx confirmed. The correlation is unmistakable, though the causation remains unclear. Decimus moved to the yacht's navigation console, accessing star charts with an intuitive understanding of the controls. Show me the void sector. The holographic display shifted to reveal a region of space where stars appeared distorted, their light bending around what seemed to be tears in the fabric of reality itself. That's not natural, Attea observed, professional interest overriding her adversarial stance. No, Decimus agreed grimly. That's the work of the Chronos Collective. They're not just trying to kill me, they're attempting to alter the timeline on a galactic scale. How can you be certain? Looma demanded. Because I've seen similar effects before, when Maltruant attempted to rewrite reality. Decimus explained. And because the Terminus protocol that preserved my consciousness was specifically designed to counter temporal manipulation. He turned to face the three women, a plan crystallizing. I'm proposing an alliance, not as emperor and subjects, but as equals with a common enemy. Myaxx, your scientific expertise is unmatched in understanding these anomalies. Looma, your people's strength and honor will be essential in the coming conflict. Attea, your tactical genius and knowledge of guerrilla warfare might be the edge we need against an enemy that can literally see us coming. And what do we get in return? Attea asked, practical as always. For the Incursine remnant, full recognition and protected status within the Dominion. For the Tetraman, reformation. Not just Senate representation, but a complete review of all policies affecting your worlds. Decimus held their gazes steadily. And for both of you, a chance to build something better than what came before. The yacht fell silent as the two princesses considered his offer. Finally, Attea spoke. I still don't entirely believe you're Ben Tennyson Reborn, she said bluntly. But whoever you are, you're not the same Emperor Decimus who's been systematically dismantling what's left of my people's civilization for the past decade. I will reserve judgment, Looma declared formally. But I will fight alongside you against these Chronos collective enemies. They dishonor themselves with assassination rather than open challenge. And I, Myaxx added, will continue my scientific service. Though I must insist on thoroughly examining your physiological condition at the earliest opportunity. Decimus nodded, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. Then we have an accord. When we reach the contingency citadel, follow my lead. The Privy Council needs to understand the threat we're facing without realizing how much my perspective has changed. As the yacht approached a massive structure floating in space, a fortress composed of the same blue-gray material as the palace, but constructed like a geometric mandala of interconnected chambers, Decimus felt a strange sense of familiarity. Not déjà vu, but something more profound, as if two lives were finally beginning to synchronize within him. The hero he had been and the emperor he now was, merging into something new. Emperor, Myaxx said quietly as they prepared to dock, there's something else you should know. Something that might explain why your consciousness found its way to this particular body, in this particular time. What is it? Decimus asked. Emperor Decimus's genetic structure wasn't natural. It was engineered, combining DNA from multiple species to create a being of unprecedented capabilities. Myaxx hesitated before continuing, and one of the primary genetic templates used in that engineering came from preserved samples of the legendary Ben Tennyson's DNA. The revelation hit him like a physical blow. I'm a descendant of myself, more like a recreation, Myaxx clarified. The Imperial scientists who created Decimus were attempting to replicate the adaptability of the Omnitrix in a living being. They never expected consciousness transfer as well. Who else knows this? Decimus asked, his mind racing with implications. Very few, Myaxx assured him. The project was classified at the highest levels. But if the Chronos Collective knows, then that explains why they see me as a temporal aberration, Decimus concluded. A consciousness that should have ended centuries ago, inhabiting a body partially created from its own DNA. From their perspective, I'm a paradox that threatens the stability of the timeline. The yacht completed its docking procedures, connecting to the NTI Engine C citadel with a resonant hum of machinery. Well, Attea remarked dryly, checking her weapons one final time, at least now we know why they want you dead so badly. Nothing personal, just temporal housekeeping. Decimus managed a smile that felt both familiar and strange on his new face. Story of my life. Both of them. As they prepared to disembark and face the Privy Council, Decimus ND himself filled with an unexpected sense of purpose. The hero who had sacrificed everything to save reality had been given a second chance, not just to live again, but to build something meaningful in this distant future. A chance to unite worlds, protect the innocent, and perhaps find connection with these complex, fascinating women who had once been his adversaries. The yacht's exit ramp descended, revealing an honor guard waiting to escort them into the citadel. Emperor Decimus squared his shoulders and stepped forward, Ben Tennyson's determination shining through his eyes. The universe had given him a rebirth. Now it was time to show it what he could do with a second chance. Chapter 2. Bonds of Destiny. The Contingency Citadel's council chamber presented a stark contrast to the ornate grandeur of the imperial palace. Where the palace celebrated beauty and tradition, this room was designed for function and security, a massive dodecahedral space with representatives from 20 key systems seated at tiered platforms. Holographic displays flickered between them, showing real-time data from across the Nexus Dominion. Decimus stood at the center of this political arena, acutely aware of the skeptical gazes fixed upon him and his unusual companions. The emergency session had been underway for nearly 3 hours, and tensions were mounting. "Emperor," said Councillor Albedo, his Van-like features arranged in an expression of careful neutrality, "while we appreciate your unorthodox diplomacy, forging sudden alliances with the Incursine Remnant and Tetraman Reformation seems conspicuously timed with the assassination attempt." Decimus felt Attea tense beside him but continued smoothly. "The attack demonstrated vulnerabilities in our security and diplomatic approaches. When adversity reveals weaknesses, wisdom demands adaptation." "Pretty words," rumbled a massive counselor with crystalline features. "But the Petrosapian Consortium questions whether adaptation should include embracing known agitators." "Careful who you call an agitator, rock face," Attea muttered, just loudly enough to be heard. Before tensions could escalate, Myaxx stepped forward with precise timing. "Honored Council, the dimensional anomalies in the Void Sector present a far greater threat than political disagreements. Our preliminary analysis suggests they're expanding at an exponential rate." The scientist activated a holographic projection showing the distortions Decimus had observed on the yacht. The council chamber fell silent as the implications became clear. Reality itself was unraveling at the Dominion's borders. "This," Decimus stated firmly, "is why I've enlisted specialized expertise. Princess Attea's experience with interdimensional incursions during the Incursine Empire's expansion, Princess Looma's knowledge of the affected Tetraman colonies in the sector, and Chief Scientist Myaxx's unparalleled understanding of transdimensional physics." "And what exactly do you propose, Emperor?" asked a counselor whose species Decimus didn't recognize, something avian with multifaceted eyes. "A specialized expedition to the epicenter of the anomalies," Decimus answered. "Led personally by me. With this elite team, we'll determine the cause and neutralize it." The council erupted in overlapping objections, concerns about the Emperor leaving the capital during a succession crisis, questions about trusting former enemies, debates about resource allocation. Decimus let them argue, observing which counselors aligned with which positions. His merged memories provided HTS into the political landscape that Ben Tennyson would never have grasped. Finally, Albedo raised a hand for silence. "The Charter grants the Emperor authority to undertake missions of critical security importance. However," he added with careful emphasis, "protocol requires the genetic authentication seal before such authorization is complete." Decimus recognized the trap immediately. The Genet IC authentication seal would analyze his biological signature at the quantum level, potentially revealing the consciousness transfer to the Council. "Of course," he replied smoothly, mind racing. "However, given that my genetic structure was temporarily disrupted during the assassination attempt, Chief Scientist Myaxx has advised a 48-hour stabilization period before authentication procedures." He turned to Myaxx, whose momentary surprise quickly transformed into professional confirmation. "Indeed, the Emperor's unique physiology requires calibration after combat stress. Premature authentication could trigger a cascading cellular rejection scenario." Albedo's eyes narrowed fractionally. "How inconvenient." Nevertheless, the Council acknowledges the medical necessity. "You have 48 hours to prepare your expedition, Emperor. After which, authentication will be required before departure." "Thank you, Counselor." Decimus inclined his head respectfully. "I suggest we adjourn to allow preparations to begin immediately." As the council session disbanded, Decimus led his unlikely alliance through the Citadel's secured corridors toward the private Imperial quarters. Once inside with privacy fields activated, he turned to face his companions. "Well," Attea drawled, sprawling casually across an anti-gravity lounge chair, "that was almost impressive." Quick thinking with the genetic authentication dodge. It won't hold for long, Myaxx cautioned, already accessing the room's computer systems. The seal will detect the consciousness integration. We need to understand Attea. CTLY what's happening to your physiology before then. Looma, who had remained stoically silent throughout the council session, finally spoke. I care little for politics and scientific debates. What I want to know is whether you truly intend to honor your promises regarding Tetraman representation. Decimus met her four-eyed gaze directly. I do. In fact, I plan to draft the authorization today, before we depart. Depart. Attea sat up straighter. The council gave us 48 hours. Which they'll use to investigate me further and possibly restrict our movements, Decimus pointed out. We need to reach the void sector now, while we still have operational freedom. Myaxx looked up from her analysis. The Imperial yacht can be prepared within 3 hours. But Emperor, the dimensional anomalies are extremely dangerous. Without proper research, I've dealt with dimensional threats before, Decimus interrupted gently. And we don't have time for proper research. Whatever the Chronos Collective is planning, they're already implementing it. He moved to the center of the room, activating a more detailed hologram of the Dominion. Before we leave, I need to understand the current political landscape better. My memories, both sets, are still aligning. Attea flicked her tongue thoughtfully. If you're really Ben Tennyson in there, how much do you actually remember about being Emperor Decimus? It's complex, he admitted. I have access to his memories, but they feel like something I watched rather than experienced. The more I use them, the more integrated they become. Fascinating, Myaxx murmured. A gradual consciousness synchronization rather than complete replacement. What matters, Looma declared practically, is whether you can function as Emperor. The Dominion is already fracturing. 3 more systems declared independence while we were in the council session. Decimus nodded grimly, which is exactly what the Chronos Collective wants. Destabilize the Dominion, create political chaos, and use that distraction to accelerate their work in the void sector. He turned to Attea. I need your expertise first. The Incursine territories border the anomaly zone. What have your people observed? Something shifted in Attea's demeanor, a subtle transformation from sardonic exile to military commander. Temporal fluctuations began approximately 3 standard months ago. Initially small, localized time dilation fields, objects appearing from nowhere. Then entire settlements began disappearing, replaced by versions of themselves from different timelines. She moved to the hologram, adjusting it with practiced ease to zoom in on a specific region. My scouts reported structures appearing near the largest anomalies. Clockwork architecture, similar to the assassins who attacked you. Chronos Collective outposts, Decimus confirmed. They're not just studying the anomalies, they're creating them. But why? Looma questioned. What purpose does destabilizing reality serve? Control, Myaxx suggested. Master temporal manipulation, and you control cause and effect itself. Or erasure, Decimus added quietly. If they believe I'm a temporal aberration, they may be trying to eliminate the specific timeline that allowed my consciousness transfer. A chime from the communication system interrupted their discussion. The display showed a security feed from the Citadel's docking bay, where an unusual vessel had just arrived, a ship composed entirely of crystalline material that seemed to pulse with internal light. That, Myaxx said with evident surprise, as a Petrosapian diplomatic vessel. But we weren't expecting any Petrosapian delegations. Decimus studied the vessel, feeling an inexplicable sense of recognition. Not Petrosapian, he corrected. Similar crystalline composition, but the energy signature is different. That's a crystal sapine ship, Myaxx finished, checking her readings. Exceedingly rare. Their homeworld was destroyed centuries ago. The security feed showed the vessel's entry port dissolving, revealing a tall, slender figure composed of violet crystal. As the figure descended the ramp, Decimus felt a jolt of recognition that transcended both his lifetimes. Xylene, he whispered. Attea observed the Emperor with renewed interest. His recognition of the crystalline being confirmed his impossible claim more convincingly than any of his previous statements. Nobody in the current era would recognize a crystal sapine on sight, let alone know this specific individual's name. The diplomatic reception area hummed with tension as they awaited the visitor. Attea maintained a casual posture, one hand never far from her concealed sidearm. Old habits died hard, and her 50 years in exile had taught her the value of constant vigilance. The crystalline visitor entered with fluid grace, her body seeming to flow rather than walk. Up close, Attea could see that she wasn't solid crystal but rather a matrix of cries. Tallene structures containing luminescent energy. When she spoke, her voice resonated with harmonic overtones. Emperor Decimus, the being said. Or should I address you as Ben Tennyson? Attea's Han. D moved imperceptibly closer to her weapon. How could this stranger know what they'd only just discovered? Decimus remained impressively composed. I answer to both names now, Xylene. Though I admit, I'm surprised to see you after all these centuries. The crystalline being's features shifted in what might have been amusement. Time flows differently for my kind, especially since my consciousness transference. The crystal sapine matrix allows for extended perspectives. Consciousness transference. Myaxx stepped forward, scientific curiosity overriding protocol. You're not originally crystal sapine. No more than your emperor is originally. Xylene paused, studying Decimus with glowing eyes. Interesting. Your current form incorporates genetic material from at least 17 distinct species, including trace celestial sapien markers. Ambitious engineering. Looma crossed her forearms impatiently. How do you know the Emperor's former identity? Are you allied with the Chronos Collective? Xylene's crystalline features registered something like offense. I stand in opposition to those who would manipulate the temporal continuum. I was one of the original custodians of the Omnitrix project, alongside Azimuth. When the Terminus Protocol activated centuries ago, I tracked the consciousness fragments across spacetime. She turned back to Decimus. I've been waiting for the fragments to reconverge. When I detected the unique energy signature of your awakening, I knew Ben Tennyson had returned, though in a most unexpected form. Attea's tactical mind rapidly assessed this new development. If this crystalline being had been tracking Ben's consciousness for centuries, she possessed information that could be either invaluable or extremely dangerous. Convenient timing, she noted dryly. You show up right after assassination attempts and right before we head to investigate temporal anomalies. There is no coincidence in temporal matters, Xylene replied, unfazed by Attea's suspicion. The Chronos Collective's efforts to eliminate Decimus and my arrival are connected by causal threads beyond conventional perception. She's right, Decimus said. And we need her expertise. Xylene understands the Omnitrix technology better than almost anyone alive. Myaxx cleared her throat. With respect, Emperor, as your chief scientist, I should evaluate any claims of specialized knowledge before. Your expertise is impressive, chimera sui generis, Xylene interrupted smoothly, but limited by three-dimensional thinking. The technology that preserved Ben's consciousness operates on principles beyond conventional science. Before Myaxx could respond, alarms blared throughout the Citadel. The holographic displays shifted to security feeds showing multiple breaches in the structure's outer levels. The collective has returned, Looma declared, already drawing her weapons. No, Decimus corrected, studying the intrusion patterns. Different attack signature. These time manipulators, they're conventional forces, but highly coordinated. Attea moved to the tactical display, her military training automatically analyzing the threat. 3 distinct entry points, synchronized breach tactics. Whoever they are, they're well-funded and professional. The security feed caught a clear image of one attacker, a tall, spectral figure with a cranial crest and energy project. Acting staff that seemed oddly familiar to Attea, though she couldn't place it. Decimus, however, clearly recognized the attacker. Siphon, he said with evident surprise. Or at least, someone using his equipment. Siphon's dynasty, Myaxx explained grimly. Criminal syndicate operating in the outer systems. Their founder claimed descent from a servant of some ancient warlord. Vilgax, Decimus and Xylene said simultaneously. Attea watched as Decimus accessed the Citadel's defense systems with practiced efficiency. For someone who claimed to be new to this body and position, he adapted remarkably quickly to Imperial technology. Another point in favor of his impossible story. They're targeting the secure archives, he noted. Level 87, Section C. The genetic repository, Myaxx said with alarm. Including samples from me, Decimus finished grimly. Both the current me and, apparently, the original Ben Tennyson. Attea made a quick decision. I'll handle the intruders. Infiltration countermeasures are my specialty. She turned to Looma. 4 arms, you're with me. Your subtle approach could use some Tetraman finesse. Looma bristled at the nickname but nodded in agreement. We will secure the repository while you determine our next course of action, Emperor. I'll coordinate from the central security hub, Myaxx added. Decimus nodded. Xylene and I will access the Imperial Vault. There's technology there we may need for the Void Sector mission. As they prepared to separate, Attea found herself hesitating, a rare occurrence for someone whose survival had depended on decisive action. Emperor, she said, the formal title feeling strange on her tongue. If you really are Ben Tennyson underneath that fancy genetic cocktail. Yes, he prompted when she paused. Try not to get yourself killed again. It was actually almost interesting having you back. Without waiting for his response, she activated her tactical armor, a lightweight exoskeleton that enhanced her already formidable Inkerscene abilities, and headed toward the repository with Looma following close behind. Looma Red Wind had fought alongside many warriors in her centuries of life, but never an Inkerscene. Their species had been enemies for generations, the frog-like Inkerscenes relying on technology and cunning, while Tetramans valued strength and direct confrontation. Yet as they moved through the Citadel's maintenance passages toward the genetic repository, Looma found herself reluctantly impressed by Attea's efficiency. Security drones ahead, the Inkerscene whispered, holding up a hand in the universal gesture for halt. Passive scan pattern, 9-second rotation. Looma nodded, readying her war hammer. I'll create a diversion. No diversions, Attea interrupted. Stealth approach. Follow my lead. Before Looma could protest, Attea had extracted a small device from her armor and tossed it down the corridor. It emitted a barely perceptible pulse that caused the drones to momentarily reset their scanning patterns. In that brief window, Attea gestured for Looma to move. Against her instincts, Looma followed, keeping her massive frame as quiet as possible. They passed the drones without incident. Continuing deeper into the Citadel. You fight without honor, Looma observed once they were clear, though there was less condemnation in her voice than there would have been hours earlier. Attea's cybernetic eye whirred as she glanced back. I fight to win. Honor doesn't matter if you're dead. Honor matters especially if you're dead, Looma countered. How one falls defines one's legacy. Legacy, Attea scoffed. I've spent 50 years in exile watching my people's legacy crumble. Give me survival over legacy any day. They fell silent as they approached the repository entrance. Signs of conflict were evident. Disabled security measures, scorch marks from energy weapons. Attea raised a hand for caution as they reached the final corridor. 3 hostiles inside, she whispered after checking her scanner. Armed with Siphon Dynasty disruptors. Nasty weapons. They don't just kill, they destabilize your molecular structure first. Looma adjusted her grip on her hammer. The weight comforting in her hands. Then we must be faster than their weapons. On my signal. Wait, Attea interrupted again, studying her scanner. They've already accessed the genetic samples. They're preparing to depart with something. A containment unit. Looma frowned. Why steal the Emperor's genetic material? Same reason anyone steals anything valuable, Attea replied. To use it or sell it to someone who will. They had no more time for speculation as the repository doors slid open. 3 figures emerged, humanoid but with spectral qualities, their bodies semi-transparent and fluctuating. Each wore equipment reminiscent of what Looma had seen in historical records of Vilgax's era, modernized with current technology. The leader carried a glowing containment unit. Looma didn't hesitate. With a Tetraman war cry, she charged forward, all 4 arms wielding different weapons. The Dynasty operatives reacted instantly, raising their disruptors. The air crackled with deadly energy as Looma dodged the first blast, closing distance with inhuman speed. Attea, meanwhile, had vanished from sight, a tactical cloak, Looma realized. Moments later, one of the Dynasty operatives jerked backward, Attea materializing behind him with a neural disruptor pressed to his neck. He collapsed in a heap of sparking cybernetics. The genetic samples, Attea shouted. Don't let them escape with the container. Looma engaged the leader directly, her hammer connecting with his defensive shield in a shower of energy. To her surprise, he matched her strength, his spectral form suddenly solidifying into something more substantial. Adaptive physical properties, Looma realized aloud. Like the Emperor. Precisely, the dynasty leader replied, his voice distorted through his helmet. Our master has spent decades studying the hybrid physiological principles that created Emperor Decimus. These samples will complete his work. Your master will be disappointed, Looma declared, pre-SSING her attack with renewed determination. Her lower arms deployed shock gauntlets that disrupted the leader's shield while her upper arms brought the hammer down with devastating force. The leader staggered but maintained his grip on the containment unit. The third operative provided covering fire, forcing Looma to dive aside. As she rolled back to her feet, she saw Attea locked in combat with the leader. Her smaller form moving with incredible speed as she attempted to secure the container. Tetraman, Attea called out, containment field. Understanding immediately, Looma activated her armor's energy projectors. All four arms extended outward, generating a hemispherical barrier that trapped the dynasty operatives inside with them. No escape, Looma announced with satisfaction. Face us honorably or fall where you stand. The leader laughed, an unnerving sound through his distortion field. We need not escape physically. Before either woman could react, all three operatives began to dematerialize. Their forms becoming increasingly translucent. The containment unit, however, remained solid. Chronos Tech, Attea spat, lunging for the container. Their phase shifting. Her NDS closed around the containment unit just as the leader fully dematerialized, leaving her holding the prize. The energy barrier Looma had created sparked violently as the phasing operatives passed through it, then collapsed entirely. They're gone, Looma said unnecessarily, scanning for threats. Attea examined the containment unit cautiously. They left this behind too easily. It could be. The unit suddenly pulsed with blinding light. When Looma's vision cleared, she saw Attea sprawled unconscious on the floor, the container open and empty beside her. Attea, despite their species' traditional enmity, Looma felt genuine concern as she rushed to the Incarcene's side. The cybernetic implants around Attea's eye were sparking, and her breathing seemed shallow. Looma activated her armor's communication system. Emperor, we have a situation. The dynasty acquired genetic samples but left behind a trap. Attea is down, and I require immediate medical support. Decimus's voice came through with surprising clarity. Bring her to the medical bay on level 60. We'll meet you there. And Looma, be careful. If they're using Chronos Tech, there may be temporal side effects. Looma gently lifted Attea's unconscious form, the Incarcene feeling unexpectedly fragile in her forearms. As she carried her former enemy toward the medical facilities, Looma found herself reflecting on the strange turns of fate that had brought her here. She had come to challenge Decimus for the throne, to secure justice for her people through traditional combat. Instead, she found herself protecting him, fighting alongside an Incarcene, and potentially facing enemies who manipulated time itself. Honor demanded she follow this path to its conclusion, wherever it might lead. And if that path continued along this strange emperor with two identities, well, she would face the challenge when it came. Xylene moved through the imperial vault with ethereal grace, her crystalline form casting prismatic reflections across the ancient artifacts stored there. Decimus found himself torn between the urgent need for equipment and the fascination of watching her, seeing how her once humanoid appearance had evolved into something transcendent. You have questions, she observed without turning, her harmonics conveying subtle amusement. A few thousand, he admitted. Starting with how you ended up as a living crystal matrix. Her form shifted, facets rearranging to face him. When my original body reached its natural end, I transferred my consciousness into a crystal sapine host through a process not unlike what you experienced. Over centuries, the integration became more complete until I was neither fully myself nor fully crystal sapine, but something new. So you understand what I'm going through, Decimus realized. To an extent, she agreed, though your transformation was far more abrupt, and your new form far more complex. Emperor Decimus was already a marvel of genetic engineering before your consciousness arrived. Decimus approached a secured chamber at the rear of the vault, his body automatically responding to biometric scanners. The Imperial scientists who created this body used my original DNA as a template. Does that make me my own descendant? Genetics are merely the medium, Not the message, Xylene replied philosophically. What matters is that the Terminus protocol work. It is azimuth intended, preserving your essence until it could find a compatible vessel. The chamber door dissolved, revealing an inner sanctum containing objects of unmistakable power and significance. Decimus approached a pedestal holding what appeared to be a miniature galaxy contained within a crystalline sphere. The cosmic cartography, Xylene identified it, created by the Contempolia to navigate between realities. It will be essential for our journey to the Void Sector. Decimus carefully secured the device. You said you've been tracking my consciousness fragments across spacetime. Were there others, other versions of me that awakened before now? Xylene's crystalline features arranged themselves into something like sorrow. There were attempts, 17 potential integrations over the centuries. None achieved stability. Quote, what happened to them? Various outcomes. Most disintegrated as the consciousness integration failed. Some became something other. Not quite Ben Tennyson, not quite their original selves. The Chronos Collective terminated several once they detected the temporal anomalies. Decimus absorbed this troubling information as he continued gathering equipment, a set of quantum stabilizers, energy modulators, and other devices whose functions he understood instinctively through his merged memories. And what makes me different? He finally asked. Why did the integration succeed this time? Compatibility, Xylene said simply. Emperor Decimus's hybrid physiology provided the perfect matrix, complex enough to accommodate your multifaceted consciousness, stable enough to maintain integration. And perhaps, she added more softly, the universe required Ben Tennyson's return at this specific moment. Before Decimus could pursue this philosophical tangent, his communication system activated with Looma's urgent message about Attea. After responding, he quickly finished gathering the necessary equipment. We need to get to the medical bay, he told Xylene, securing the last of the devices. And then to our ship. The dynasty's attack confirms my suspicions. Multiple factions are converging around the same objective. We need to reach the Void Sector B. before they can complete whatever they're planning. As they hurried through the Citadel's corridors, Decimus found himself increasingly comfortable with his new form's capabilities. The hybrid physiology responded intuitively, allowing him to move with superhuman speed and precision. What had initially felt alien was becoming natural with each passing hour. They arrived at the medical bay to find Looma standing protectively near a treatment pod containing Attea's unconscious form. Myaxx was already there, operating the advanced medical equipment with practiced efficiency. Status, Decimus asked, moving immediately to Attea's side. Temporal energy surge, Myaxx reported without looking up. It overloaded her cybernetic systems and caused a neurological cascade. I've stabilized the immediate damage, but what? Decimus prompted when she hesitated. Her timeline is destabilizing, Xylene answered instead, her crystalline hand hovering over Attea's form without touching it. The energy discharge was calibrated to create a localized temporal fissure within her consciousness. She exists partially outside normal chronological flow now. Looma stepped forward, concern evident despite her warrior's composure. Can you repair this damage? Not repair, Xylene clarified. But stabilize, yes. It will require direct consciousness synchronization. Like what happened to me, Decimus realized. Similar, though more controlled, Xylene confirmed. I can extend my crystalline matrix to create a temporal anchor for her consciousness. Do it, Decimus ordered, then added more gently, please. Xylene moved to the treatment pod, her crystalline form shifting and flowing. Tendrils of luminescent crystal extended from her hands, gently enveloping Attea's unconscious form. The Amber fell silent as they watched the delicate procedure unfold, crystalline energy merging with Attea's damaged cybernetics. After several tense minutes, the Inkersine's organic eye fluttered open. She gasped, then coughed violently, her body spasming in the treatment pod. Hold her still, Myaxx instructed, and Looma immediately used two hands to gently restrain Attea while the other two assisted Myaxx with medical instruments. What happened? Attea managed between coughs. Temporal trap, Decimus explained, relief evident in his voice. The dynasty used Chronos technology to destabilize your timeline. Attea's cybernetic eye, which had been sparking erratically, suddenly stabilized, its glow shifting from red to a violet hue that matched Xylene's crystalline energy. I've created a Temporal shunt through her existing cybernetics, Xylene explained. It will keep her anchored to our present timeline, though the connection is interactive. Meaning what? Attea demanded, sitting up despite Looma's restraining hands. Meaning, Xylene said, that a portion of my consciousness now resides within your cybernetic systems, maintaining temporal stability. We are connected. Attea stared at the crystalline being. Then at her own hands, where faint traces of crystalline patterning were visible beneath her skin. That's invasive. It was that or allow your consciousness to fragment across multiple timelines. Xylene replied evenly. The choice seemed clear. Before the conversation could continue, the Citadel's alert system activated again, this time with the highest priority signal. Holographic displays throughout the medical bay showed a massive fleet emerging from hyperspace near Nexus Prime. Siphon's dynasty, Myaxx identified, checking the tactical data. At least 30 capital ships and hundreds of smaller vessels. This isn't just a raid, it's an invasion force. Decimus studied the fleet configuration with growing alarm. They're positioning for a planetary bombardment. But why now? What changed? Us, Looma suggested grimly. Our alliance represents a potential threat to whatever they're planning. Or they're working with the Chronos Collective, Attea added. Sliding off the treatment pod despite Myaxx's protests. Her movements were slightly unsteady, but her expression was pure military determination. Create chaos here while the real operation continues in the void sector. Decimus made a quick decision. We stick to our original plan. The Imperial yacht can slip past the blockade using the quantum drive. We head for the void sector immediately. While your capital comes under attack, Looma challenged. That is not honorable leadership. It's strategic leadership, Decimus countered. The Citadel's defenses can withstand bombard. Meant long enough for the Imperial fleet to respond. But if we don't stop whatever's happening in the void sector, there might not be a capital, or a universe, left to defend. After a moment of tense silence, Looma nodded reluctantly. Your strategy has merit. We will proceed as planned. One problem, Myaxx interjected. The Dynasty forces have established a blockade around all major spaceports, including the Imperial docking bay. The yacht is inaccessible. Decimus smiled for the first time since the alarms began. Then it's a good thing we have an expert in breaking through blockades. He turned to Attea. Think you can get us to our ship? Despite her recent trauma, Attea's lips curved into a familiar smirk. Breaking blockades is practically the Incursine national pastime. But we'll need a diversion. I believe I can provide that, came a new voice from the medical bay entrance. They turned to see Albedo standing there, his Galvan-like features unreadable. For a tense moment, Decimus prepared for another confrontation. But the counselor's next words surprised him. The Privy Council has authorized emergency protocols. All defensive resources are at your disposal, Emperor. Albedo's eyes shifted to the assembled group. Though your choice of companions remains concerning. Counselor Albedo, Decimus acknowledged cautiously. I appreciate the Council's support, but why you personally delivering this message? Albedo stepped fully into the chamber, the door sealing behind him. Because, Emperor, I have information relevant to your mission. Information about the void sector. And about your unique condition. Decimus exchanged glances with his companions before responding. I'm listening. Not here, Albedo insisted. The Dynasty has infiltrated the Citadel's communication systems. We must speak aboard your vessel, assuming we can reach it. Another series of explosions rocked the Citadel, this time much closer. The medical bay's lights flickered momentarily before emergency systems engaged. Direct hit to the outer defenses, Myaxx reported, checking the status displays. Shield integrity at 70% and declining. We need to move now, Decimus decided. Attea, what's your plan for breaking the blockade? The Incursine was already accessing the Citadel's systems through her newly crystalline enhanced cybernetics. There's a maintenance tunnel network that connects to a secondary docking bay. Smaller facility, minimal security. The Dynasty might not have it covered yet. And the diversion? Looma asked. Attea grinned, her tongue flicking out in anticipation. How do you feel about explosive decompressions and false reactor breach warnings? 30 minutes later, alarms blared throughout the contingency citadel as emergency protoc. Ols announced a catastrophic reactor breach in progress. Evacuation pods launched from every level, creating a chaotic sensor environment that confused the Dynasty blockade. Amid this confusion, a Glay maintenance shuttle departed from an obscure tertiary docking port, its signature masked by the radiation warnings emanating from the Citadel. Inside the cramped shuttle, Decimus and his unlikely allies monitored the Dynasty fleet's response to their diversion. They're focused on the evacuation pods, Attea reported from the pilot's position, her hands moving with practiced precision over the controls. Her cybernetic eye glowed with Xylene's crystalline energy, providing enhanced perception. Deploying intercept drones, but spreading their resources too thin. The Imperial yacht is still secured in Docking Bay 7. Myaxx added, linked to the Citadel's systems through a secure channel. But Dynasty boarding parties are approaching that sector. We'll need to move quickly once we dock, Decimus said, checking the equipment they'd salvaged from the vault. Looma, you and I will secure the path to the yacht. Attea pilots, Xylene monitors temporal stability, and Myaxx prepares the drive systems. And what about me? Albedo asked from his position near the rear of the shuttle. The counselor had been suspiciously quiet during their escape preparations. Decimus studied him carefully. You said you have information. You'll share it once we're safely aboard the yacht and clear of the blockade. As you wish, Emperor, Albedo replied with a slight inclination of his head. I should note that my information may be relevant to our current tactical situation. Before Decimus could press further, the shuttle rocked violently as a stray energy blast grazed their hull. We've been spotted, Attea announced, executing an evasive maneuver that pressed them all against the shuttle's restraint systems. Intercept drones converging on our position. How far to the docking bay? Looma demanded. 2 minutes at current speed, Attea replied, her tongue flicking nervously. But we won't last 2 minutes under concentrated fire. Decimus assessed their options rapidly. Myaxx, can you access the Citadel's point defense systems from here? Partially, the scientist confirmed, her fingers dancing across the control interface. I can redirect a few automated batteries, not enough to clear our path completely. We need a shield, Albedo stated matter-of-factly. One capable of withstanding Dynasty weapons. I might be able to help with that, Xylene said, her crystalline form shifting. But it will require significant energy and concentration. Decimus made an instant decision. Do it, whatever it takes to reach that docking bay. Xylene moved to the center of the shuttle, her form expanding outward in crystalline tendrils that spread across the shuttle's interior surface. The crystals began to glow with intense energy, creating a secondary layer between the shuttle's hull and space. Fascinating application of crystalline phase shifting, Myaxx observed, momentarily distracted from her work on the defense systems. Less admiring, more flying, Attea shot back, executing another series of evasive maneuvers as energy blasts continued to target their vessel. The crystalline shield absorbed the impacts, dispersing their energy throughout its lattice structure. Each hit caused Xylene's form to flare with absorbed power, her features becoming momentarily strained. We're approaching the docking bay, Attea announced. But the exterior doors are sealed. Myaxx, working on it, the scientist replied tensely. Dynasty encryption is interfering with the override commands. Another hit, more powerful than the previous ones, caused the crystalline shield to crack in several places. Xylene made a sound like harmonics under stress. I cannot maintain this protection much longer, she warned. Albedo suddenly moved forward, inserting himself between Myaxx and her console. Allow me, he said, his fingers moving with incredible speed across the interface. Galvan cognitive processing has certain advantages. Before anyone could object, the docking bay doors began to slide open, revealing the Imperial yacht still secured inside. However, Dynasty boarding parties were visible on the approach gantries, nearly at the yacht's entry points. We'll never reach it before they do, Looma observed grimly. We don't have to, Decimus countered, accessing the yacht's systems through his Imperial authorization codes. The elegant vessel responded instantly, its defense systems activating and its entry ramps retracting despite the boarding party's attempts to gain access. Remote initialization sequence, Myaxx realized. Brilliant. Don't celebrate yet, Attea cautioned as she guided their shuttle toward the now active yacht. We still need to transfer from one vessel to the other with those Dynasty troops in the way. The shuttle screamed into the docking bay. Attea's piloting skills allowing her to thread between defensive emplacements and support structures. She brought them alongside the yacht with surgical precision, aligning their airlock with one of the yacht's auxiliary entrances. Docking clamps engaged, she announced. Pressure equalization in progress. Looma, with me, Decimus ordered, moving toward the airlock. We'll secure the transfer point. The Tetraman warrior followed without hesitation, all four hands reaching for different weapons. As the airlock cycled open, they found themselves facing a contingent of D.Y. nasty troops who had managed to cut through the yacht's outer hull at precisely the wrong moment. What followed was a brief but intense close-quarters battle. Decimus found his hybrid body responding with exceptional combat efficiency, strength beyond what Ben Tennyson had possessed in human form, reflexes augmented by genetic optimization, and energy projection abilities that manifested instinctively when needed. Looma fought at his side with perfect coordination, her four-armed combat style complementing his abilities. Where he employed precision and energy manipulation, she provided overwhelming force and battlefield control. The path is clear, Looma called back to the others once the last Dynasty trooper had been neutralized. Move quickly. The transfer proceeded with military ethic. INC, Attea and Myaxx rushing to the yacht's bridge while Xylene maintained her protective crystalline field around their position. Albedo moved with surprising agility for his seemingly frail form, revealing combat training that seemed incongruous for a Privy Council member. Once aboard, Decimus sealed the breach in the yacht's hull using his energy manipulation abilities, creating a temporary TCH that would hold until automated repair systems could engage. Attea was already at the pilot station, bringing the vessel's primary systems online. Dynasty reinforcements converging on our position, she reported. Weapons charging. Drive systems online. We need immediate departure clearance. The docking clamps are still engaged, Myaxx noted with concern. And the bay doors aren't fully open. Decimus took his position at the command station, Imperial authorization codes flowing from his mind directly into the yacht's systems. Override Protocol Epsilon. Authorization. Decimus Prime. The yacht responded instantly. Docking clamps disengaging, auxiliary power rerouting to shields and propulsion. Outside, the Dynasty boarding parties were regrouping for another assault. Hold on to something, Attea warned as her hands danced across the controls. This is going to get rough. The Imperial yacht surged forward, its powerful engines engaging at a fraction of their capacity, enough to propel them through the partially opened bay doors without tearing the vessel apart. Metal screamed against metal as the yacht scraped through the opening, structural integrity fields straining to compensate. Then they were clear, accelerating away from the Citadel and into space where the Dynasty fleet maintained its blockade. 37 vessels detecting our departure, Myaxx reported from the sensor station. Intercept courses plotted, weapons locked, deploying countermeasures, Looma announced, taking control of the defensive systems with practiced ease. Defensive screen at maximum power. Attea navigated the yacht through the opening salvo with extraordinary skill, her enhanced perception allowing her to anticipate attack patterns seconds before they developed. The vessel twists, Tedden rolled through three-dimensional space with grace that belied its size. We can't outrun them indefinitely, Decimus observed, studying the tactical display. We need to reach minimum safe distance for quantum drive activation. 2 minutes at current acceleration, Myaxx calculated. Their intercept vectors will converge in approximately 90 seconds. Then we need another diversion, Decimus decided. He turned to Xylene, who had been monitoring temporal conditions around the vessel. Can you create a localized time dilation field? Something to confuse their targeting systems. Crystalline being considered this request. Possible, but risky. It could alert the Chronos Collective to our departure vector. Better than being destroyed here, Attea countered, executing our series of evasive maneuvers as energy beams lanced past their position. After a moment's consideration, Xylene moved to the center of the bridge, her form expanding outward in tendrils of crystalline energy. The space around the yacht began to shimmer as temporal distortions manifested, subtle alterations in chronological flow that caused incoming weapons fire to arrive fractionally before or after their targeting systems predicted. The effect was immediate. The Dynasty fleet's precision faltered, their coordinated assault pattern breaking down as temporal inconsistencies corrupted their tactical data. It's working, Looma reported with satisfaction. Their hit ratio has dropped by 70%. Maintain course, Decimus ordered Attea. Quantum drive preparation at maximum priority. As they pushed toward the safe activation distance, Albedo finally approached Decimus at the command station. Perhaps now would be an appropriate time for me to share what I know, the counselor suggested quietly. Decimus glanced at him sideways, still focused on the tactical situation. Make it quick and relevant. The Chronos Collective isn't simply trying to erase you as a temporal aberration, Albedo began. They're attempting to harness the energy signature of your consciousness transfer to power a device called the Continuum Engine. This caught Decimus's full attention. What does this engine do? It allows selective rewriting of historical events without creating paradox cascades, Albedo explained. The user can alter specific timeline elements while preserving overall continuity. The perfect tool for subtle temporal manipulation. How do you know this? Decimus demanded. Albedo's expression remained neutral. Because I helped design it, centuries ago, when I was someone else. Someone you once knew quite well. Ben Tennyson. Before Decimus could process this revelation, Myaxx called out, minimum safe distance achieved. Quantum drive ready for activation. Engage, Decimus ordered. The conversation with Albedo momentarily postponed by urgent necessity. The Imperial yacht's quantum drive activated, enveloping the vessel in a field of distorted spacetime. Unlike conventional faster-than-light travel, quantum transit didn't move the vessel through space, it temporarily shifted it into an adjacent quantum reality where distances were compressed. The starfield outside the yacht's viewports smeared into bands of light, then resolved into the distinctive non-space of quantum transit, a realm of shifting patterns and mathematical precision that defied conventional description. As the immediate danger passed, Decimus turned back to Albedo. Continue. Who exactly were you? The Galvan-like being smiled thinly. I was once known as Professor Paradox. Myaxx had witnessed many impossible things during her scientific career, but the revelations unfolding aboard the Imperial yacht tested even her expansive definition of plausibility. She monitored the quantum drive systems while keeping one ear tuned to the conversation between Emperor Decimus and Counselor Albedo. Professor Paradox, Decimus repeated, recognition and disbelief mingling in his voice. The time traveler. But how? A similar process to your own transformation, Albedo, or Paradox, explained. After centuries of temporal manipulation, my original human form became unstable. I required a new vessel. One capable of sustaining my unique chronological signature. So you chose a Galvan host, Xylene observed, her crystalline form still maintaining the temporal field around the yacht thou. GH at reduced intensity now that they had entered quantum transit. A genetically modified Galvan template, he corrected. Based on Azimuth's assistant Albedo, who had already demonstrated compatibility with human consciousness transfer. The irony of assuming a form reminiscent of Ben Tennyson's old adversary was not lost on me. Myaxx found herself fascinated despite her scientific skepticism. If true, this meant 3 of the beings aboard this vessel had undergone consciousness transfer processes, Decimus, Xylene, and now Albedo Paradox. The statistical improbability was staggering. Why didn't you identify yourself immediately? Looma demanded, her Tetraman sense of honor clearly offended by the deception. 2 reasons, the former Paradox replied. First, the Chronos Collective has agents throughout the Dominion, particularly within the Privy Council. Second, I needed to confirm that Emperor Decimus truly contained Ben Tennyson's consciousness before revealing myself. And the Continuum Engine, Decimus pressed. How does it connect to what's happening in the Void Sector? Paradox moved to the navigation console, accessing the star charts with the authorization codes his council position provided. A detailed map of the Void Sector materialized in the center of the bridge, showing the expanding dimensional anomalies. The Continuum Engine was my creation, a theoretical device designed to heal damaged timelines without creating additional ruptures. In the wrong hands, however, it becomes a tool for precise temporal engineering. He highlighted a specific region within the anomaly field. The Chronos Collective has constructed a prototype here, using technology stolen from my various time periods. But it's incomplete, Xylene added, studying the display. They lack Ka critical component, a stable temporal focus point. Something that exists simultaneously in multiple timeframes without causing paradox. Something like my consciousness, Decimus realized. Ved from centuries ago but active in the present. Precisely, paradox confirmed. The Terminus Protocol created the perfect temporal signature, a consciousness that belongs to multiple points in spacetime without violating causality. Myaxx found herself automatically analyzing the scientific implications. So the assassination attempts were never about killing you, Attea finished from the pilot's station. Her enhanced cybernetic eye scanning the temporal data with new understanding. They were trying to capture you. Or more specifically, capture the temporal signature of your consciousness. Which explains why the dynasty forces were stealing genetic samples, Looma added, the pieces fitting together. They need your genetic code to calibrate the engine to your specific temporal frequency. Decimus absorbed this information with remarkable composure. So our mission to the Void Sector just became even more critical. We're not just investigating anomalies, we're preventing the Harem's collective from gaining the ability to rewrite history at will. There's more, Paradox said grimly. The collective isn't working alone. They've allied with the Void Architects, a cult dedicate to entities that exist between realities. Beings that would find our universe considerably more accessible if the barriers between timelines were weakened. A heavy silence fell over the bridge as the implications sank in. Myaxx found her scientific mind racing through probabilities and outcomes, none of them particularly encouraging. Estimated arrival at the Void Sector. Decimus finally asked. 6 hours in quantum transit. Myaxx reported after checking the navigation systems. Assuming no interference. We should use that time wisely, Xylene suggested. The Emperor requires training to fully access his hybrid abilities. Especially those related to temporal perception. Agreed, Paradox said, and I believe our Incursine pilot could benefit from better understanding her new crystalline enhancements. Attea flicked her tongue in annoyance. My enhancements are working fine. They're working instinctively, Xylene corrected. But they offer capabilities far beyond what you're currently utilizing. The rest of us should prepare combat strategies, Looma suggested practically. If the Void Sector is as dangerous as described, we'll need coordinated tactics. Decimus nodded in agreement. Paradox, Xylene, and I will work on temporal perception training. Looma, you and Myaxx develop tactical approaches. Attea, I'll keep flying this extremely expensive Imperial yacht T. Hero the nightmarish hellscape that is quantum space, the Incursine finished dryly. While occasionally allowing Crystal Head here to show me new tricks with my unwanted implants. Despite the gravity of their situation, Myaxx found herself suppressing a smile. The dynamics between these disparate individuals were fascinating, former enemies finding common purpose, ancient beings guiding newer ones. All centered around an emperor who contained the consciousness of a legendary hero. As a scientist, she should be skeptical. As a rational being, she should question the improbable convergence of events. Instead, she found herself believing, not just in the threat they faced, but in their capacity to overcome it together. The next few hours passed in focused preparation. Myaxx worked with Looma to analyze the combat capabilities of each team member, developing complementary strategies that maximized their unique abilities. The Tetraman warrior proved surprisingly analytical, her centuries of battle experience translating into tactical insights that impressed even Myaxx's scientific mind. Meanwhile, Decimus worked with Paradox and Xylene in what appeared to be a form of meditative training. Accessing aspects of his hybrid physiology that had remained dormant. Occasionally, Myaxx would glance over to see his form glowing with internal energy, temporal echoes shadowing his movements. As he learned to perceive beyond conventional chronological limitations, Attea remained at the pilot's station, maintaining their course through quantum space while periodically engaging in training sessions with Xylene. The crystalline enhancements to her cybernetics were evolving, allowing her to perceive quantum fluctuations that might affect their transit. During a brief rest period, Myaxx flew ND herself alone with Decimus in the yacht's observation lounge, a space designed to allow safe viewing of quantum space, its protective fields filtering the reality-bending visual effects to prevent psychological damage. How are you adapting to your new existence, Emperor? She asked, genuine scientific curiosity mingling with personal concern. Decimus gazed out at the quantum patterns swirling beyond the viewport. Better than I would have expected. It helps that part of me has lived in this body for years, even if those memories feel borrowed. The integration appears to be accelerating, Myaxx observed. Your neural patterns show increasing synchronization between the Emperor Decimus baseline and what we presume to be the Ben Tennyson consciousness patterns. I can feel it, he acknowledged. It's becoming harder to distinguish which thoughts come from which lifetime. Soon, I might not be able to separate them at all. Does that concern you? Myaxx asked carefully. Decimus considered this question seriously. It should, probably. Ben Tennyson was defined by his humanity as much as by the Omnitrix. Emperor Decimus was never human at all. As they merge, he trailed off, searching for words. You fear losing essential aspects of both, Myaxx finished for him. Or becoming something neither of them would recognize, he admitted. Something new and undefined. Myaxx found Dee herself touched by his vulnerability, so different from the aloof Emperor Decimus she had served before his transformation. New doesn't necessarily mean lesser, she offered. Your hybrid physiology represents the pinnacle of genetic engineering, combining strengths from multiple species. Perhaps your hybrid consciousness will prove similarly advantageous. He turned to look at her directly, though. Say solid green eyes studying her with unexpected intensity. You've been remarkably accepting of this situation, Myaxx. The others all knew Ben Tennyson in some capacity, but you only knew Emperor Decimus. I am a scientist, she replied with a slight shrug. Adaptation to new data is fundamental to my discipline. Besides, she added more hesitantly, Emperor Decimus was brilliant but distant. Calculated. You retain his knowledge and abilities, but demonstrate something he often lacked. Which is empathy, Myaxx said simply. You see people, not just strategic assets or scientific problems. It's refreshing. A comfortable silence fell between them as they watched the quantum patterns together. After several minutes, Decimus spoke again. The Chronos Collective, Siphon's dynasty. The Void Architects, they're all converging on the same objective from different angles. There's something we're still missing, some connection we haven't identified yet. Myaxx nodded thoughtfully. The statistical probability of 3 major factions independently targeting the same objective is vanishingly small. There must be a unifying factor. Or a unifying figure, Decimus suggested. One with the influence to coordinate such disparate groups. Before they could pursue this line of thought further, the yacht's alert system activated. Attea's voice came through the communication system with urgency. Everyone to the bridge, now. We've got company in quantum space, which should be completely impossible. Decimus and Myaxx exchanged alarmed glances before rushing back to the bridge. Upon arrival, they found a disturbing sight on the main view screen, a massive vessel pacing them through quantum space, its design unlike anything in Imperial records. Clockwork architecture, Paradox identified grimly. A Chronos Collective timeshift vessel. They've adapted my old theories on quantum displacement to create ships capable of pursuing targets through transit space. How did they find us so quickly? Looma demanded. The temporal distortions we created during our escape, Xylene suggested. They must have tracked the signature. They're hailing us, Attea reported, her cybernetic eye flashing with data. Decimus moved to the command position. Let's hear what they have to say. The view screen shifted to show the interior of the pursuing vessel. Standing at its center was a figure that caused both Decimus and Paradox to freeze in recognition, a mechanical being with clockwork components, resembling Maltruant but with subtle differences in design and coloration. Ben Tennyson. The figure addressed him directly, ignoring his current form. And Professor Paradox as well. How convenient to find you both together after all this time. Maltruant. Decimus questioned. Out he could already sense this wasn't the same entity he had fought in his final battle as Ben. No, Paradox answered quietly. Maltruant's legacy, a chronosapian constructed from his remaining comp. Onance and programmed with his objectives. Correct, Professor, the mechanical being confirmed. Though I prefer the designation Epicellipse. My predecessor's mission continues through me, the proper ordering of all timelines according to the grand design. Your predecessor tried to collapse all reality, Decimus countered. That's not ordering timelines, that's destroying them. A temporary phase in a larger process. Epicellipse dismissed. Destruction preceding reconstruction. But we needn't revisit old arguments. I contact you now with an offer. We're listening, Decimus said cautiously. Your temporal signature is unique. Ben Tennyson. Valuable. The continuum engine requires it to function correctly. The mechanical being's clockwork face arranged itself in what might have been a smile. Surrender yourself voluntarily, and the Nexus Dominion will be preserved in the new chronological arrangement. Resist, and it will be the first civilization erased. That's not much of an offer, Attea observed sarcastically. It is exceedingly generous, Epichalipse countered. Particularly given the alternative, pursuit and capture under significantly less comfortable circumstances. Imus exchanged glances with his companions, a silent communication passing between them. Then he returned his attention to the viewscreen. Here's my counter-offer, he said calmly. Return to normal space, dismantle the continuum engine, and cease all temporal manipulation activities. In exchange, I won't have to remind you why Maltruant ultimately failed against Ben Tennyson. The Chronosapiens. Clockwork features clicked and whirred in what might have been amusement. Your confidence is misplaced. You are not truly Ben Tennyson, merely an echo of his consciousness inside an artificial body. Without the Omnitrix, you lack the capabilities that once made you formidable. You might be surprised, Decimus replied, a familiar determination in his voice despite his transformed appearance. I've been learning some new tricks. Before Epichalipse could respond, Decimus nodded to Attea. The Incursine pilot immediately executed a maneuver that should have been impossible in quantum space, a SU-D-den vertical dive relative to their previous course, taking them beneath the pursuing vessel. Simultaneously, Xylene and Paradox combined their temporal abilities, creating a localized distortion T momentarily confused the Chronos collective ship's tracking systems. Looma and Myaxx activated the yacht's defensive measures, deploying quantum disruptors that further complicated their pursuers' targeting solutions. Impressive coordination, Epichalipse's voice came through despite the evasive maneuvers. But ultimately futile. We exist partially outside conventional time. We cannot be evaded through such methods. We're not trying to evade you, Decimus corrected as the yacht suddenly accelerated to maximum quantum velocity. We're trying to beat you to the void sector. He signaled for the communication to be cut, leaving the bridge in tense silence broken only by the sound of systems operating at maximum capacity. The yacht wasn't designed for sustained maximum velocity in quantum space, Myaxx warned. Monitoring the drive systems. Structural integrity is already showing strain. How long can we maintain this pace? Decimus asked. Perhaps 30 minutes before critical systems begin to fail. She estimated grimly. And how long until we reach the void sector? Myaxx checked the navigation data. At current velocity, 28 minutes. Attea laughed without humor. Cutting it a bit close, aren't we? Can the Chronos vessel match our speed? Looma asked practically. Not immediately, Paradox answered, studying the tactical display. Their timeshift technology sacrifices raw velocity for chronological stability. They'll fall behind initially but maintain pursuit. Then we have a narrow window of opportunity, Decimus concluded. We'll reach the void sector just ahead of them. Find the continuum engine, and disable it before they can use it. A bold strategy, Xylene observed. Though perhaps our only viable option under the circumstances. As the Imp, aerial yacht pushed beyond its design specifications, racing through quantum space with its chronological pursuers close behind, Myaxx found herself marveling at how quickly their situation had evolved. What had begun as an investigation into dimensional anomalies had transformed into a desperate race to prevent timeline manipulation on a universal scale. And at the center of it all was Decimus, nay, they're fully Ben Tennyson nor entirely Emperor Decimus, but something new emerging from their merged consciousness. Someone capable of inspiring this unlikely alliance of former enemies and ancient GS to work together against an existential threat. Whatever happened when they reached the void sector, Myaxx realized she had already made her choice. She would follow this hybrid emperor wherever his path led, not out of scientific curiosity or imperial obligation, but out of something far more personal, respect, admiration, and perhaps something deeper that she wasn't quite ready to name. The yacht's structural integrity alarms began to sound as they approached their destination. Outside the viewports, quantum space began to show signs of destabilization, the mathematical patterns fracturing into chaotic arrangements that reflected the dimensional anomalies of their target location. Preparing for emergency transition to normal space, Attea announced, her enhanced cybernetics allowing HaremOf to process the complex navigational data at superhuman speeds. Everyone secure yourselves. This will not be gentle. As Myaxx activated her restraint field, she caught Decimus's eye across the bridge. The look they exchanged contained volumes, concern, determination, and a shared understanding of what awaited them in the void sector. Whatever happened next would determine not just the fate of the Nexus Dominion, but potentially the structure of reality itself. The pressure should have been overwhelming, yet Myaxx felt strangely calm. Perhaps it was the scientist in her, fascinated by unprecedented phenomena. Or perhaps it was simply faith in the extraordinary being who had once been Ben Tennyson, now reborn as something both more and less than human. Quantum exit in 5 seconds, Attea called out. Welcome to the edge of reality, everyone. The yacht shuddered violently as it tore through the barrier between quantum space and normal space-time. Alarms blared as systems overloaded, emergency protocols engaging automatically to prevent catastrophic failure. And then they were through, emerging into a region of space that defied conventional physics. The viewscreen showed a nightmarish landscape where stars appeared stretched and distorted, where gravitational forces twisted in impossible patterns, and where reality itself seemed to be coming apart at the seams. The void sector, Paradox confirmed unnecessarily. Or what remains of it. In the distance, barely visible among the spatial distortions, a massive structure hovered like a wound in the fabric of space-time, the Continuum Engine. Nearly complete and awaiting only its final component. We made it, Decimus said quietly. Now comes the hard part. As if in response to his words, space rippled around them as more vessels began to appear. Dynasty ships emerging from conventional hyperspace, Chronos collective timeshift vessels phasing into existence, and strangest of all, organic-looking craft that seemed to bleed into reality from somewhere else entirely. Void architect vessels, Paradox identified the latter with evident concern. All 3 factions, converging on our position. They were waiting for us, Looma realized. This was a trap, or an opportunity, Decimus countered, his expression hardening with resolve. Either way, we finish this together. As the Imperial yacht limped toward the Continuum Engine, surrounded by enemies on all sides, Myaxx found herself smiling despite the danger. Whatever came next would certainly be interesting, in the best scientific sense of the word. And with he being who combined Ben Tennyson and Emperor Decimus leading them, she couldn't help believing they might actually succeed. Chapter 3. Emperor's Ascension. Reality fractured around the damaged Imperi. Yacht as it drifted between converging enemy fleets. Gravity fluctuated wildly, objects floating momentarily before crashing down with twice normal force. Light bent unnaturally, creating prismatic halos around every solid surface. The very fabric of space-time seemed to be unraveling, revealing glimpses of alternate realities bleeding through dimensional barriers. Decimus stood at the center of the bridge, his hybrid form radiating a subtle green energy as he assessed their desperate situation. Through the viewports, the Continuum Engine loomed, a massive structure resembling an impossibly complex clock mechanism. Its interlocking components slowly rotating around a central void where space itself appeared to fold inward. Status report, he commanded, his voice steady despite the chaos surrounding them. Attea's fingers danced across the navigation console, her crystalline-enhanced cybernetics interfacing directly with the ship's systems. Drive systems operating at 18%. Capacity, barely enough for maneuvering thrusters. Weapons at 43%. Shields, she grimaced, 12% and fluctuating with each temporal wave. Dynasty forces establishing block. Aid formation at coordinates 227 Mark 384, Looma reported from the tactical station, all 4 arms working simultaneously across different control interfaces. Chronos collective vessels emerging from temporal shift at 116 Mark 009. Void architect bioships, she frowned. Their positioning defies conventional spatial coordinates. They appear to exist partially in adjacent dimensions. Fascinating tactical approach, Paradox observed, his Galvan-like form hovering near the central display. They're creating a 3-dimensional enclosure while operating from a 4th-dimensional vantage point. Less admiring, more strategizing. Attea snapped, her tongue flicking nervously as she executed another evasive maneuver that sent everyone grabbing for support. Decimus studied the tactical display, his merged consciousness providing unique insight. Ben Tennyson's experience with impossible odds merged with Emperor Decimus's strategic brilliance, creating something greater than either alone. They haven't attacked yet, he noted. They're positioning to prevent our escape, not to destroy us. They need you alive, Myaxx concluded, monitoring the quantum fluctuations surrounding their vessel. Your temporal signature is the final component for the continuum engine. Which gives us leverage, Decimus replied. And a potential opening. A communication alert chimed, interrupting their planning. The bridge's main display activated to reveal 3 separate transmissions. Epichalips's mechanical visage representing the Chronos Collective, a spectral being with Siphon's distinctive crest for the dynasty, and a shifting, almost incomprehensible form that seemed to bleed through reality itself for the Void Architects. Emperor Decimus, the Siphon-like figure began, its voice ying the same obsequious tone Ben remembered from his old enemy. Or should I say, Ben Tennyson. I am Siphon V, rightful heir to the dynasty. My great-great-grandfather spoke of you in his final records. Temporal anomaly designation. Benjamin Kirby Tennyson, Epichalipse intoned mechanically. Surrender your vessel immediately. Resistance will be met with chronological erasure of your companions. The Void Architect representative spoke last, its voice a disturbing chorus of overlapping tones. The confluence approaches. The barrier's thin. Your pattern contains the resonance we require. Submit to dissolution. Decimus exchanged glances with his companions before responding. I appreciate the coordinated ultimatum, but I notice some tension between your objectives. Epichalipse Wa. NTS my temporal signature to power the continuum engine. Siphon wants my genetic material for his own purposes. And whatever the Void Architects want seems to involve dissolving me completely. He smiled thinly. Not exactly aligned goals. Quote. A moment of silence followed as the 3 faction representatives regarded each other with newfound suspicion. Clever observation, Siphon V admitted. But irrelevant. Our temporary alliance serves all our purposes. Does it? Decimus challenged. Once the continuum engine is activated, what's to prevent the Chronos Collective from erasing the dynasty from history entirely? Or the Void Architects from using dimensional rifts to eliminate both your factions? The silence that followed held a different quality, calculation rather than surprise. Enough manipulation, Epichalipse declared finally. Your vessel is disabled, your situation hopeless. Surrender now, or we will extract you from the wreckage. The communications terminated abruptly, leaving the bridge in momentary silence. Well, Attea remarked dryly, that bought us about 30 seconds. Longer than I expected, Decimus replied. He turned to Xylene, who had remained silent during the exchange. Her crystalline form pulsing with absorbed temporal energy. What's the status of the engine? How close is it to activation? The crystalline being's facets shifted as she focused her perception beyond conventional space. The central chronological matrix is aligned but dormant. Without your specific temporal signature as a calibration point, they cannot initialize the activation sequence. Her harmonics darkened. However, they are preparing a chronological extraction array. They intend to forcibly remove your temporal essence. That sounds unpleasant, Looma observed grimly. Fatal, more likely, Paradox corrected. The consciousness integration between Ben Tennyson and Emperor Decimus is still stabilizing. Forced extraction would shatter both consciousness patterns beyond recovery. Decimus processed this information with remarkable calm. Then we need to reach the engine before they can deploy their extraction technology. Attea, how close can you get us to that structure? The Incarcene's cybernetic I-word as calculations raced across its surface. With current thrust capabilities, within 5 kilometers before enemy vessels intercept. Not close enough for shuttle deployment. We need a diversion, Looma stated, 4 hands checking various weapons. Something to divide their forces. Myaxx, who had been quietly analyzing sensor data, suddenly straightened. Emperor, I'm detecting an anomalous energy signature approximately 12 kilometers from our position. It appears to be a structure of some kind, partially phased between dimensions. Put it on screen, Decimus ordered. The display shifted to show what at first appeared to be empty space, but as the sensors adjusted, a massive structure began to resolve from the dimensional distortion, and in Scient temple or monument constructed from material that resembled crystallized time itself, its architecture defying conventional geometry. That, Paradox said with evident surprise, is a Contemmelia observatory. Contemmelia? Looma questioned. I know not this species. They existed before recorded history, Xylene explained, her harmonics reverent. They were among the first sentient beings in our universe. Observers and archivists of reality itself. And conveniently located within our limited flight range, Attea noted pragmatically. I assume it's relevant to our current mess. Decimu S studied the structure with growing excitement. The Contemmelia were masters of dimensional engineering. If their technology is still functional, we could potentially use it to approach the Conti. Nuum engine through dimensional phase shifting, Myaxx completed, already calculating possibilities. Bypassing the enemy blockade entirely. Exactly. Decimus turned to Attea. Can you get us there before they realize what we're doing? The Inkersine's lips curved into a predatory smile. Watch me. With that, she executed a maneuver that should have torn their damaged vessel apart, cutting all power momentarily before reigniting the engines in a pattern that mimicked catastrophic system failure. The yacht tumbled wildly, emergency beacons flashing distress signals across all frequencies. Playing dead, Paradox observed with appreciation. Primitive but effective. As the yacht appeared to drift helplessly, Attea used minimal thruster bursts disguised as system malfunctions to gradually alter their course toward the Contemmelia structure. On the tactical display, they watched as the enemy vessels maintained their positions, clearly believing the Imperial yacht was no longer a threat. They're dispatching boarding crafts, Looma reported. Estimated interception in 6 minutes. We'll reach the Contemmelia Observatory in 5, Attea replied confidently. Assuming it doesn't phase out of our reality before then. Decimus moved to the equipment storage area, retrieving the artifacts they'd collected from the Imperial Vault. Everyone grab essential gear and prepare for rapid deployment. We may not have much time once we reach the structure. As the others prepared, Myaxx approached him privately. Emperor, there's something else you should know about the sensor readings from that structure. What is it? He asked, noting her concerned expression. There's a life form inside. A humanoid signature with unique energy patterns I've only seen once before. She hesitated. In your medical scans. Decimus absorbed this information, his mind racing through possibilities. Someone else with hybrid physiology similar to mine. Not similar, Myaxx clarified. Complementary. As if it were designed as a counterpart to your specific genetic structure. Before he could process the implications, Attea called out from the pilot's station. 1 minute to arrival. Boarding crafts. Adjusting course to intercept. They've realized what we're doing. Looma. Defensive positions, Decimus ordered. Paradox. Xylene, prepare temporal shielding. We need to reach that observatory intact. The Tetraman warrior moved to the yacht's defensive systems, all 4 hands activating different weapon arrays. Targeting solution acquired. Firing pattern established. What followed was a brief, but intense exchange of fire as the Imperial yacht shed its pretense of helplessness. Looma's tactical brilliance manifested in precisely targeted shots that disabled pursuing craft without expending their limited weapons energy. Meanwhile, Xylene and Paradox combined their temporal abilities, creating a protective field around the yacht that caused incoming fire to phase slightly out of sync with their reality, passing harmlessly through their position as if striking a ghost ship. 30 seconds, Attea announced, her enhanced reflexes allowing impossible maneuvers despite the yacht's damaged state. Observatory structure is phase shifting more rapidly now. We may only get 1 attempt at docking. Take us in, Decimus confirmed, moving to stand behind her, one hand resting supportively on the back of her chair. The gesture wasn't lost on Attea, whose cybernetic eye flicked sideways to acknowledge his presence before refocusing on the approach vector. For a brief moment, professional detachment gave way to something more personal, a connection forged through shared danger and growing respect. As they closed on the Contemmelia structure, its true nature became apparent. What had appeared to be a single building revealed itself as an entire complex, a city-sized installation that existed partially outside normal space-time. Its architecture incorporated elements that seemed to NGE depending on the angle of perception, doorways that opened onto impossible spaces, and material that simultaneously appeared ancient and newly formed. Remarkable preservation, Paradox murmured, genuine awe in his voice. The Contempolia designed their structures to exist partially in a dimension beyond temporal decay. Docking procedure initiated, Attea reported, guiding their vessel toward what appeared to be an appropriate connection point. Though, docking might be the wrong term for connecting to a semi-dimensional structure. The yacht shuddered as it made contact with the observatory. Instead of conventional mechanical connection, the structure seemed to recognize their presence, extending phase-matched material that enveloped their docking port and stabilized their position relative to the shifting installation. Connection established, Myaxx confirmed, monitoring the interface. Atmospheric compatibility confirmed. The structure appears to be adapting to our specific biological requirements. It recognizes us, Xylene observed, her crystalline form resonating with the material of the observatory. Or more specifically, it recognizes the temporal signature Decimus carries. We have minutes at most before enemy forces converge on this position, Looma warned, monitoring the tactical display. We should proceed immediately. Decimus nodded in agreement. Attea, secure the yacht. Everyone else, with me. Whatever's waiting inside this structure, we face it together. The airlock cycled open to reveal a corridor that defied conventional architecture, its dimensions shifting subtly as they observed it. Materials flowing like liquid while maintaining structural integrity. Gravity seemed optional, with objects floating in precisely arranged patterns that suggest deliberate design rather than random effects. Stay close, Decimus cautioned as they entered, and maintain physical contact if possible. This environment may not maintain consistent spatial relationships. They proceeded deeper into the structure, marveling at technology so advanced it appeared magical. Chambers opened before them without visible mechanisms, illumination provided by what seemed to be captured starlight. And information displays formed from suspended particles that rearranged themselves in response to their thoughts. This technology, Myaxx breathed, her scientific mind, struggling to comprehend what she witnessed. It's beyond anything in Imperial records. The Contempolia existed when the universe was young, Paradox explained, his Galvan-like features alight with recognition. They witnessed the formation of galaxies and the birth of the first civilizations. This observatory was designed to monitor the development of sentient life across multiple realities. As they reached what appeared to be a central chamber, the architecture expanded dramatically, a vast spherical space containing a miniature representation of the galaxy, stars and planets suspended in perfect proportion. At the chamber's center stood a control dais where a figure waited, backlit by the galactic display. Decimus felt a shock of recognition even before the figure turned to face them. The silhouette was unmistakable, feminine but powerful, with a distinctive profile that triggered memories from his life as Ben Tennyson. "Hello, Ben," said a voice that hadn't existed in this universe for centuries. "Or should I call you Emperor Decimus now?" The figure stepped forward into clearer illumination, revealing a humanoid female with synthetic skin bearing subtle circuitry patterns, blonde hair framing a face both familiar and transformed. Her body combined organic and technological components in perfect harmony, more advanced than the version Ben had known but unmistakably the same being. "Eunice," Decimus whispered, the name emerging from Ben's memories. "The Unitrix," Xylene identified simultaneously. Eunice smiled, though the expression held complexity beyond simple pleasure. "Both correct, though I've become something more than either designation in the centuries since we last met." She gestured to the galactic display behind her. "Welcome to the Contemplation Nexus, the origin point of the civilization you now rule." "The Nexus Dominion began here?" Looma questioned, her 4 eyes scanning the chamber for potential threats despite the seemingly peaceful encounter. "In a manner of speaking," Eunice confirmed. "The founders of your empire discovered this installation 5 centuries ago. They reverse-engineered aspects of Contempolia technology to create their interstellar civilization." Her eyes fixed on Decimus. "Including the genetic engineering processes that eventually created Emperor Decimus's unique physiology." "That can't be coincidence," Myaxx observed. "Finding this specific observatory that later leads to creating a body capable of receiving Ben Tennyson's consciousness." "There are no coincidences in temporal mechanics," Paradox stated, studying Eunice with evident curiosity. "Only causality loops we haven't yet recognized." Eunice inclined her head in acknowledgement. "Precisely, Professor. Or should I call you Albedo now? You know who I am, Paradox noted, unsurprised. I know all of you, Eunice replied, her gaze moving across the group. Attea, exiled empress of the Incarcine remnant. Looma Red Wind, revolutionary princess of the Tetraman Reformation. Xylene, crystalline consciousness preserver. Myaxx, imperial chief scientist. Her eyes returned to Decimus. And you, the impossible merger of hero and emperor. How long have you been here? Decimus asked, trying to reconcile this evolved version of Eunice with his memories of the innocent, curious being he'd known as Ben. 327 years, she answered precisely. After Azimuth's death, I continued his work, monitoring, preserving, and occasionally guiding the development of key technologies across the galaxy. When the Contemlia Observatory began experiencing dimensional instability due to the Chronos Collective's experiments, I came to investigate. And became trapped. Myaxx guessed. Not trapped, Eunice corrected. Positioned. This location provides unique advantages for observing the temporal manipulations being attempted nearby. Attea, who had remained suspiciously quiet, finally spoke. This is all fascinatingly convenient. We just happened to find an ancient alien observatory containing one of Ben Tennyson's old friends who just happens to know everything about our situation. Her hand drifted toward her concealed weapon. Forgive my Incarcine skepticism, but this smells like a trap. Instead of taking offense, Eunice smiled appreciatively. Your caution is warranted, Empress Attea. But unnecessary in this case. She turned and gestured to the galactic display, which zoomed in to show the Continuum engine. I've been monitoring the collective's construction efforts for months, gathering data and preparing countermeasures. When I detected Ben's temporal signature activating within Emperor Decimus, I knew the critical moment had arrived. You knew I would come here? Decimus asked. I calculated a 67% probability, Eunice replied. The Contemlia Observatory represents both tactical advantage and answers to questions you must be asking about your transformed existence. Her expression softened. And, perhaps I hoped that some part of you would remember our connection and seek me out, however unconsciously. Looma crossed her lower arms impatiently. While this reunion is doubtless meaningful, our enemies converge outside. We require tactical advantages, not reminiscence. Direct as ever, Tetraman, Eunice acknowledged without offense. You're right, of course. She turned to the control dais, interfacing directly with its systems. The galactic display shifted to focus on the Continuum engine and the enemy fleets surrounding it. The Chronos Collective has nearly completed their engine, she explained. But they've encountered an unexpected problem. The consciousness merger between Ben Tennyson and Emperor Decimus has created a temporal signature more complex than their calibration systems can process. So they can't simply extract it, Myaxx realized. They need Decimus to interface with the engine voluntarily. Precisely, Eunice confirmed, which is why they haven't simply attempted capture. They need his conscious cooperation. Or, Attea interjected cynically, they need him intact enough to reverse engineer the integration process. They don't need him willing, just complete enough to study. Also a possibility, Eunice admitted. However, their alliance with the Dynasty and Void Architects complicates matters. Each faction wants Decimus for different purposes, cr. eating internal tensions in their cooperative efforts. The question remains, Xylene observed, her crystalline form resonating with the chamber's energy, how do we use this observatory to our advantage? Eunice's expression became more animated, a glimpse of the enthusiastic being Ben had known centuries ago. The Contemlia built this installation as a dimensional observatory, but it's also a control nexus. From here, with the right interface, we can access the dimensional boundaries surrounding the Continuum engine. Creating our own approach vector outside normal space, Paradox concluded, immediately grasping her meaning. Exactly. Eunice turned to Decimus. But it requires a specific genetic key to activate the dimensional control systems. A key the Contemlia designed into the observatory's operating protocols. Let me guess, Decimus said, the pieces falling into place. The key is my specific genetic pattern. The hybrid physiology that made me capable of receiving Ben Tennyson's consciousness. Close, Eunice replied. The key is actually the combination of your genetic pattern and mine. This revelation created a moment of startled silence. You were created as complementary systems? Myaxx asked, her scientific mind immediately analyzing implications. In a manner of speaking, Eunice explained. The Omnitrix, my original form, was designed by Azimuth as a counterpart system to the Omnitrix. Where the Omnitrix stored and transformed DNA, the Omnitrix preserved and embodied it. When the founders of the Nexus Dominion discovered this observatory and began reverse engineering its technology, they incorporated aspects of both designs into their genetic experiments, creating Emperor Decimus as an evolutionary extension of the Omnitrix concept, Paradox concluded. And you evolved yourself along parallel paths based on the Omnitrix foundation, becoming complementary keys without even realizing it, Decimus added, understanding dawning. Genetic lock and key designed across centuries. The Contempolia were masters of temporal engineering, Eunice said simply. They designed systems meant to activate at specific points in the development of universal civilization, with genetic keys that would only exist when needed. That's all fascinating, Attea interrupted, her pragmatic nature asserting itself. But the enemy fleets are establishing positions around this structure as we speak. Whatever you're planning, we need to implement it now. Eunice nodded in agreement. The activation sequence requires both Decimus and myself at the primary interface. She gestured toward an elevated platform at the chamber's center. The rest of you should prepare for dimensional transition. The experience can be disorienting for beings unaccustomed to existing between realities. As Eunice and Decimus moved toward the central platform, the others prepared their equipment and weapons. Looma checked her battle armor's integrity, while Attea calibrated her weapons for dimensional phase variances. Xylene and Paradox conferred quietly about temporal stabilization techniques, while Myaxx monitored the observatory's systems through a secondary interface. On the elevated platform, Decimus found himself standing face to face with Eunice, closer than they had been since their reunion. In her eyes, he saw recognition that went beyond his current form. She was looking at Ben Tennyson despite his transformed appearance. I never thought I'd see you again, she said quietly, her voice pitched for his ears alone. When you activated the Terminus protocol to stop Maltruant, I mourned with the others. Even Azimuth was affected more deeply than he would admit. I didn't expect to come back, Decimus admitted. Especially not like this, centuries later in a body that isn't mine. Isn't it, though? Eunice challenged gently. Your consciousness shaped it, just as my experiences shaped my evolution from the simple Omnitrix I once was. She extended her hand toward the interface. We've both become more than our original programming intended. As Decimus placed his hand beside hers on the crystalline interface, their genetic patterns triggered an immediate response. The entire chamber hummed with awakening power, light pulsing through circuits that had lain dormant for millennia. The galactic display expanded, showing dimensional overlays that reveal the true complexity of space around them. Dimensional interface activating, Eunice announced to the others. Prepare for transition in 30 seconds. As the activation sequence progressed, Decimus felt something unexpected, a mental connection forming between himself and Eunice through the genetic interface. Images and sensations flowed between them, her centuries of solitary evolution and observation. His fragmented consciousness traveling across time before reuniting in Emperor Decimus. The connection felt intimate yet natural, as if their complementary designs had always been intended to synchronize this way. You've been waiting for this, he realized aloud. Not just monitoring the collective, but preparing for the moment when the temporal signature would reactivate. Eunice's expression confirmed his insight. I calculated multiple potential outcomes across probability space. Your awakening within Emperor Decimus represented the optimal convergence point for countering the collective's plans. And your own evolution, was that calculated too? Her eyes softened. Some paths are chosen, not calculated. I could have remained a simple Omnitrix, fulfilling my basic functions. Instead, I chose to become something more, to honor the potential you once saw in me, Ben. The chamber's energy reached critical threshold, dimensional boundaries becoming visible as translucent veils surrounding them. Through these veils, they could see multiple versions of reality, potential timelines branching outward from their current position. Dimensional transition commencing, Eunice announced. Everyone remain in physical contact with at least one other person. The transition will attempt to separate us across probability space. As the observatory began its dimensional shift, Decimus felt the others moving closer. Looma's powerful hand clasped his shoulder, while Attea positioned herself at his other side, her smaller form pressed against him with practical disregard for personal space. Xylene extended crystalline tendrils that connected to each member of the group, creating a network of temporal stability. Myaxx and Paradox completed the circle, the former scientist monitoring data through portable equipment while the latter focused his considerable temporal experience on maintaining their cohesion. Reality dissolved around them, fragmenting into component possibilities. Before reconstituting into something new, a liminal space between dimensions where the laws of physics became suggestions rather than requirements. Through this not-quite reality, they moved as a connected group. Guided by the combined genetic interface of Decimus and Eunice. The continuum engine is approximately 2-dimensional kilometers ahead, Eunice informed them, her synthetic systems perfect. CTLY adapted to navigation through this impossible space. The collective has established temporal distortion fields as defense mechanisms, but they're calibrated for conventional approach vectors. Quote, not for beings traveling through dimensional interstices, Paradox noted with satisfaction. Clever exploitation of their blind spot. As they traversed the between space, Decimus became aware of faint echoes surrounding them, whispers and shadows of beings that existed primarily in these dimensional boundaries. Void entities, Xylene identified, her crystalline perception extending beyond conventional senses. The beings the Void architects seek to contact. They perceive our passage. Will they interfere? Looma asked practically, her weapons ready despite the questionable physics of their current environment. They're curious, not hostile, Eunice replied. At least not inherently. The danger comes from the architects attempting to use the continuum engine to create permanent breaches between our reality and theirs. Which would be bad, Attea guessed dryly. Catastrophic, Paradox confirmed. Dimensional segregation exists for essential reasons. Entities evolved for different physical laws cannot coexist in the same reality without fundamental breakdown of universal constants. As they neared their destination, the dimensional space around them began to show signs of manipulation. Artificial structures imposed on the natural boundaries between realities. The continuum engine became visible through the thinning dimensional membrane, its massive components rotating around the central void with increasing speed. They're initiating the activation sequence, Eunice warned. Even without Decimus's temporal signature, they're attempting to force the engine online using alternative methods. Chronological shock starting, Paradox identified with concern. Dangerous and unpredictable. They must be desperate. Or they detected our dimensional approach and are trying to complete their work before we can interfere, Myaxx suggested. Decimus studied the engine through the dimensional barrier, his merged consciousness providing unique insight into its design and purpose. Quote, the central chronological matrix, it's configured to create targeted temporal alterations rather than universal changes. Meaning, Looma prompted. Meaning they're not trying to rewrite all of history, Decimus explained. They're targeting specific events, precise moments in the timeline for alteration. The creation of the Omnitrix, Eunice realized. The development of the Terminus Protocol. The founding of the Nexus Dominion. Key points in the causal chain that led to your consciousness transfer, Paradox confirmed. By altering those events, they ensure you never exist in your current form. Which prevents anyone from stopping them in the future, Attea concluded grimly. Clever bunch of time twisters. They reached the dimensional boundary separating them from normal space near the continuum engine. Through the translucent barrier, they could see the three faction forces converging, Dynasty troops establishing defensive positions, Chronos collective technicians making final adjustments to the engine. And Void architect cultists performing rituals that seem to thin the dimensional barriers further. We need a plan before we transition back to normal space, Decimus stated, studying the enemy deployment. We'll be outnumbered and potentially outgunned. But we have the element of surprise, Attea countered, her military mind already calculating vectors and vulnerabilities. And specialized capabilities they won't anticipate. We should divide our efforts, Looma suggested. Some disrupting the engine directly, others engaging enemy forces to provide cover. Agreed, Decimus said after a moment's consideration. Eunice, Myaxx, and Paradox will target the engine itself. Your combined knowledge gives us the best chance of disabling it permanently. Looma, Attea, and I will engage the enemy forces. Drawing attention away from your work. Xylene, I will maintain our dimensional anchor point, the crystalline being finished for him. Preventing them from shifting us into a containment field once we transition. Decimus nodded in agreement. Exactly. Is everyone clear on their objectives? Each member of the unlikely alliance confirmed their understanding, checking equipment and sharing final observations about the opposition awaiting them. As they prepared to breach the dimensional barrier, Decimus felt a growing sense of rightness about the Te. They had become former enemies and new allies united by common purpose. Dimensional transition in 5 seconds, Eunice announced. Paradox, temporal shielding, Xylene, crystalline anchoring. Everyone else, prepare for immediate engagement. Reality shattered around them as they pushed through the dimensional boundary, transitioning from the between space to normal reality with explosive force. The energy discharge created a shockwave that temporarily disoriented the nearest enemy forces, buying them precious seconds to establish their positions. Decimus, Looma, and Attea immediately moved to engage the confused enemy troops, forming a protective perimeter around Eunice, Myaxx, and Paradox as they rushed toward the engine's control systems. Xylene remained at their entry point, crystal line form expanding to maintain their dimensional access as an escape route. What followed was chaos executed with precision, each member of Decimus's team performing their role with extraordinary effectiveness. Looma became a whirlwind of Tetraman fury, all 4 arms wielding different weapons as she carved a path through Dynasty security forces. Her centuries of combat experience manifested in flawless technique, each movement flowing into the next with lethal grace. Attea demonstrated why the Incursine military had once been feared across multiple systems. Her enhanced cybernetics and natural agility made her nearly impossible to target as she leapt between positions, precisely placed shots disabling enemy weapons and communication systems. The crystalline enhancements from Xylene Allo led her to perceive temporal distortions, enabling her to anticipate chrono attacks from collective forces seconds before they manifested. Decimus himself revealed the full potential of his hybrid physiology for the first time. Where before he had used isolated abilities, now he integrated them into a seamless whole: strength, speed, energy manipulation, and temporal awareness combining with tactical brilliance. His form seemed to flow between different capability sets, adapting instantly to each new threat. When Dynasty forces deployed energy shields, he shifted to penetrating frequencies. When Chrono's troops attempted temporal displacement, he instinctively matched their phase variance. Meanwhile, Eunice, Myaxx, and Paradox reached the engine's primary control nexus. Their approach triggered automated defenses. But Paradox's temporal manipulations created protective bubbles of altered time, slowing incoming attacks to manageable speeds. Myaxx deployed counter-intrusion devices from her scientific arsenal, bypassing security protocols with methodical precision. Eunice, whose synthetic systems could interface directly with the engine's technology, began the delicate process of accessing its core programming. The activation sequence is at 78% completion, she reported, her hands moving across control surfaces with blurring speed. Once it reaches 90%, the process becomes self-sustaining. Focus on the chronological matrix stabilizers, Paradox suggested, deflecting a temporal disruption bolt with a precisely timed counter wave. Without stable reference points, the engine cannot maintain targeting coherence. Working on it, Myaxx confirmed, connecting analysis equipment to key junction points. But the security protocols are adapting to our intrusion attempts. Someone is actively countering our efforts. Across the platform, beyond the immediate battle, a figure emerged from within the engine's central housing, tall and imposing, wearing armor that combined elements of all 3 factions. As the helmet retracted, Decimus felt shock ripple through his merged consciousness. Vilgax, he whispered, the name emerging from Ben's memories. But this wasn't exactly the Vilgax he had known. This being had Vilgax's general appearance and bearing, but with significant differences: cybernetic enhancements more seamlessly integrated, physical proportions more balanced, and eyes that glowed with internal power rather than mechanical implants. Not quite, the being replied, its voice carrying familiar overtones despite obvious differences. Vilgax was my genetic template. Just as Ben Tennyson was yours, Emperor Decimus. You might call me Vilgax Reborn. Another consciousness transfer, Paradox realized aloud. But how? Vilgax perished centuries ago. The same way Ben Tennyson survived, the being answered, approaching with measured steps. Genetic preservation and consciousness encoding. Though in my case, the process was deliberate rather than a last-minute sacrifice. Understanding dawned on Decimus. You're the one who united these factions. The Chronos Collective, Siphon's Dynasty, the Void Architects, they're all working for you. With me, Vilgax Reborn corrected. Each serves their own interests, which happen to align with mine. The collective seeks controlled temporal engineering. The dynasty desires genetic perfection. The architects crave dimensional access. A cold smile. I simply showed them how all these goals become possible through the Continuum engine. As they spoke, the battle continued around Looma and Attea holding back enemy forces while Eunice and Myaxx worked frantically to disable the engine. Xylene's crystalline form pulsed with increasing strain as she maintained their dimension. Anchor point against mounting opposition. You orchestrated everything, Decimus realized. The assassination attempts, the dimensional anomalies in the void sector, all to lure me here. I required your temporal signature. Vilgax Reborn acknowledged. The final component for precise calibration. When reports reached me of Emperor Decimus suddenly exhibiting behavior patterns reminiscent of Ben Tennyson, I knew the Terminus Protocol had finally found its target after centuries of drift. Why? Decimus demanded. What could possibly be worth this level of manipulation across centuries? Transformed. Vilgax's expression shifted to something almost contemplative. The universe is broken, Tennyson. Has been since its formation. Random, chaotic, wasteful. His eyes narrowed. The Continuum engine allows targeted corrections, precise adjustments to eliminate evolutionary dead ends and maximize civilization potential. You mean control everything, Decimus countered. Rewrite history, until it matches your vision of perfection. Improvement, not control, Vilgax insisted. Guided evolution rather than random chance. The Contemlia understood this principle. Why do you think they be you? Observatories and dimensional nexus points. They were preparing for eventual temporal engineering. As they exchanged words, Decimus was subtly repositioning, drawing Vilgax Reborn's attention. Why from Eunice and Myaxx's efforts at the engine controls? He could see through their mental connection that Eunice was making progress, having identified key vulnerabilities in the activation sequence. The Contemlia observed. Decimus argued, continuing the distraction. They didn't interfere. There's a difference between studying reality and rewriting it. A distinction without meaning, Vilgax dismissed. Observation changes the outcome regardless of intent. The Contemlia knew this. Their technology was designed for eventual intervention, not merely passive watching. Nearby, Attea found herself surrounded by dynasty forces. Her position increasingly precarious despite her exceptional combat skills. Seeing her predicament, Looma made a split-second decision, abandoning her own advantageous position to charge through enemy lines toward the Incursine. Tetraman, stay in formation. Attea shouted, recognizing the tactical error even as she appreciated the intent. No warrior left isolated, Looma responded, her cultural code overriding strict tactical consideration. With devastating force, she cleared a path to Attea's position, forearms creating a perimeter of destruction around them. The momentary realignment created an opening in their defensive screen. Chronos troops immediately exploited it, deploying temporal stasis fields that threatened to cut off Eunice and Myaxx from the engine controls. Seeing the danger, Paradox made a decisive sacrifice. Continue your work, he called to them before deliberately stepping into the advancing stasis field. His unique temporal nature transformed the field's energy, creating a cascading reaction that temporarily neutralized all temporal technology in the vicinity. Vilgax Reborn noticed the disruption, his attention momentarily diverted from Decimus. Your allies fight impressively, he acknowledged. But futilely. The activation sequence has passed 85%. In moments, the engine will begin its first targeted temporal adjustment. Which is what exactly? Decimus demanded, needing to understand the immediate threat. The erasure of a single, critical moment, Vilgax replied with disturbing calm. The day Azimuth decided to create the Omnitrix. Without that decision, everything that followed unravels naturally. No Ben Tennyson as you knew him, no Terminus Protocol, no consciousness transfer to Emperor Decimus. The implications hit Decimus with physical force. Not just his own existence threatened, but all the good Ben Tennyson had done across his lifetime: worlds saved, invasions prevented, lives protected. An entire legacy of heroism wiped from history with a single targeted change. It won't work, he stated with conviction born of both his lives. The timeline has redundancies, protective mechanisms. Remove the Omnitrix, and something else would have emerged to fill its role. Perhaps, Vilgax conceded, but not with you as its wielder. That specific conjunction, Ben Tennyson and the Omnitrix, is the linchpin for this particular timeline. Remove it, and reality reconfigures along more manageable paths. At the engine controls, Eunice suddenly straightened, her synthetic systems having identified a critical vulnerability. Myaxx, the chronological reference array. It's calibrated to a specific temporal frequency. The Imperial scientist immediately understood, adjusting her equipment to target the identified system. Initiating interference pattern, she confirmed, deploying a device that began emitting precisely modulated energy waves. Vilgax Reborn sensed the threat to his plans. Anger replacing philosophical calm. Enough discussion, he growled, the resemblance to the original Vilgax suddenly more pronounced. With frightening speed, he launched himself at Decimus, CYB. Hermetically enhanced limbs deploying weapons that combined technologies from all three factions. What followed was a confrontation centuries in the making: Vilgax and Ben Tennyson, reborn in new forms, but carrying forward their ancient enmity. They clashed at the heart of the Continuum engine platform, each demonstrating abilities far beyond their original incarnations. Vilgax Reborn fought with He accumulated knowledge and technology of multiple civilizations, his hybrid form incorporating the most effective combat systems from across the galaxy. Temporal displacement fields surrounded his strikes, while dimensional phasing allowed him to shift partially between realities to avoid counterattacks. Decimus responded with equally evolved capabilities. His merged consciousness provided perfect synergy between Ben's creative combat approach and Emperor Decimus's tactical precision. His hybrid physiology adapted instantly to each of Vilgax's technological advantages, developing countermeasures through what appeared to be accelerated evolution. Around them, the larger battle continued its chaotic progression. Looma and Attea had established an unlikely but effective partnership, the Tether. Ammon's raw power complementing the Incarcene's precision as they held back waves of enemy forces. Their contrasting combat styles merged into something greater than either alone: centuries of species. Enmity transformed into battlefield harmony. Paradox, partially phased into the temporal stasis field, maintained the neutralization effect through sheer force of will, his consciousness stretched between multiple timeframes. The strain was evident, but his determination never wavered. This was the culmination of centuries of preparation, the moment toward which his long existence had been building. Xylene's crystalline form had expanded throughout the chamber, creating a network of temporal stability that prevented the Chronos Collective from simply erasing them from the timestream. Each Cry's Tallene tendril maintained a different aspect of their temporal anchoring, her consciousness distributed across multiple points simultaneously. At the engine controls, Eunice and Myaxx worked in perfect coordination. The synthetic being's direct interface capabilities combined with the scientist's analytical precision. They had identified the key vulnerability in the engine's design: its need for table reference points in the timeline to target specific events for alteration. The interference pattern is working, Myaxx reported, monitoring energy fluctuations. The chronological reference array is losing coherence. Activation sequence stalled at 89%, Eunice confirmed. But Vilgax's systems are already adapting. We need something more definitive than interference. Myaxx's brilliant mind made the conceptual leap instantly. Not interference, replacement. If we substitute a different temporal signature as the reference point, we could redirect the engine's targeting system, Eunice completed. Immediately understanding. But we would need a temporal signature as complex as Decimus's to serve as an alternative focus. Their eyes met in simultaneous realization. Yours, Myaxx stated, your evolution as the Omnitrix created a temporal signature almost as unique as his. Almost isn't sufficient, Eunice cautioned. The calibration would be imperfect. Imperfect is exactly what we need, Myaxx insisted. An imperfect calibration doesn't prevent the engine from activating, it causes it to activate incorrectly. Understanding dawned on Eunice's features. Ting a feedback loop in the temporal calculations. Brilliant, Myaxx. Without further hesitation, she physically connected herself to the engine's control systems, her synthetic form interfacing directly with its temporal matrix. Across the platform, Decimus sensed what was happening through his lingering connection with Eunice. Even as he battled Vilgax Reborn, a confrontation that utilized every aspect of his hybrid capabilities, he recognized both the brilliance and danger of their plan. Eunice is redirecting the engine's targeting system, he called to the others. We need to be ready for temporal instability. Vilgax also realized what was happening, his attacks becoming more desperate. Stop them, he commanded his forces. The Unitrix is compromising the calibration sequence. Too late, Eunice completed the connection, her unique temporal signature flowing into the engine systems as an alternative reference point. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The massive structure's rotation patterns stuttered. Energy discharges arcing between components as conflicting temporal coordinates created mathematical impossibilities within its programming. Temporal feedback cascade initiating, Eunice announced. Her synthetic voice strained as the connection threatened to overwhelm her systems. Estimated time to critical failure, 45 seconds. That's our cue to leave, Attea called out, dispatching a final opponent before backing toward their dimensional entry point. Unless anyone fancies being caught in whatever happens when a time machine has a meltdown. The dimensional anchor is weakening. Xylene warned, her crystalline form showing signs of stress fractures. We must depart immediately. Vilgax Reborn, recognizing the imminent failure of his centuries-long plan, abandoned all tactical restraint. With a roar of fury, he activated his armor's ultimate function, dimensional phase shifting that allowed him to move through solid matter, heading directly for the engine's core. He's trying to manually override the feedback loop. Paradox warned, still partially trapped in the temporal stasis field. Decimus made an instant decision. Looma, get Myaxx to the dimensional exit. Attea, help Xylene maintain the anchor. I'm going after Vilgax. Without waiting for acknowledgement, he pursued his ancient enemy into the engine's interior structure, phase shifting his own form to match Vilgax's dimensional frequency. The interior of the Continuum engine defied conventional physics, spaces larger inside than outside, components that existed simultaneously in multiple configurations, and energy patterns that formed sentient-like sequences. At the engine's core, Vilgax Reborn was attempting to physically disconnect the temporal matrix from the power distributio. End system, a desperate measure that might stop the feedback loop but would release uncontrolled temporal energy throughout the installation. Stop, Decimus commanded, reaching the core chamber. You'll create a temporal explosion that could erase this entire sector from existence. Better oblivion than failure, Vilgax snarled, his form shifting between solid and translucent as the engine's destab. Illization affected his dimensional phasing. If I cannot perfect the timeline, then this flawed reality deserves erasure. That was always the difference between us, Decimus realized aloud. In any form, any timeline, I fight to protect what exists, flaws and all. You destroy what doesn't match your vision of perfection. With that fundamental insight, Decimus attacked with renewed purpose, not just fighting an enemy, but defending a principle central to both his existences. Ben Tennyson had protected Earth and countless worlds despite their imperfections. Emperor Decimus had maintained the thus dominion through crisis after crisis, preserving civilization despite its flaws. Their final confrontation transcended physical combat. As the engine's destabilization progressed, reality itself became malleable around them, past, present, and potential futures bleeding together in the temporal maelstrom. They fought across multiple probability states simultaneously, each seeking advantage in the fluctuating conditions. Through his connection with Eunice, Decimus sensed the countdown approaching its final seconds. His team had reached the dimensional exit point, prepared for emergency transition back through the barriers between realities. Only he and Vilgax remained within the engine's core structure. With a final surge of effort, Decimus managed to separate Vilgax from the temporal matrix controls. It's over, he declared, energy coursing through his hybrid form as he maintained a stabilizing field around the most critical components. The engine is lost, but we can still contain the temporal explosion. You think this ends here? Vilgax laughed bitterly, his form increasingly unstable as reality fluctuated around them. I exist across multiple timelines now, just as you do. This is merely one confrontation in an eternal conflict. Then we'll have it again, Decimus promised. Wherever and whenever necessary. With seconds remaining, Decimus made his choice. Using his connection to Eunice as a navigational beacon, he phase-shifted away from the core, leaving Vilgax Reborn still struggling with the controls as the temporal feedback reached critical threshold. The dimensional transition was chaotic and disorienting, reality fragmenting around him as he pushed through barriers never meant for conventional traversal. Only Eunice's genetic complementarity allowed him to maintain coherence through the journey, her unique signature guiding him back to the others. He emerged into the crystalline chamber of the Contemplalia Observatory to find his team gathered in tense anticipation. Through the observatory's dimensional viewers, they watched as the continuum engine collapsed in upon itself, a temporal implosion that consumed the massive structure along with the enemy forces too slow to escape its radius. Vilgax, Looma asked simply as Decimus materialized fully among them. Caught in the temporal collapse, he confirmed. Though given his nature, I doubt that's the last we'll see of him in some form. Quote, the enemy fleets are in disarray, Attea reported, monitoring external conditions through her enhanced cybernetics. Without the engine or unified leadership, the alliance between factions is dissolving. More immediately concerning, Myaxx interjected, the temporal explosion has created a cascade of dimensional instabilities throughout the void sector. This entire region will become uninhabitable within hours. The observatory can protect us temporarily, Eunice assured them, her system still recovering from the strain of interfacing with the engine. But we need to return to the Nexus Dominion before the dimensional barriers completely collapse. Our yacht is still docked with the observatory, Xylene noted, her crystalline form gradually consolidating after its extended deployment. Though its drive systems were already compromised before the temporal event. Paradox, finally free from the temporal stasis effects, smiled with unexpected confidence. Perhaps we can use the observatory itself as our transport. The Contemplalia designed these structures to survive dimensional realignment events. Eunice nodded in agreement. The observatory contains navigation systems capable of traversing dimensional boundaries. With Decimus and my genetic keys, we can initiate a controlled translocation directly to the Nexus Dominion capital. Then let's not delay, Decimus decided. The sooner we return, the sooner we can address the political situation created by our absence. As they prepared for departure, Decimus found himself reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had brought them together. From his awakening as Emperor Decimus with Ben Tennyson's consciousness, through the assembly of this unlikely alliance, to the defeat of a threat that spanned centuries, it represented a second chance he had never expected when activating the Terminus Protocol. More than that, he realized as he looked at the 5 women who had fought alongside him. It represented connections he would never have formed otherwise. Attea, whose military brilliance and sardonic humor masked a leader deeply committed to her people's survival. Looma, whose honor and strength had evolved beyond rigid tradition into something more thoughtful and nuanced. Xylene, whose ancient wisdom and crystalline transformation offered perspective spanning millennia. Eunice, whose synthetic nature contained more humanity and compassion than many organic beings. And Myaxx, whose scientific brilliance was matched by unexpected personal courage. Together, they had prevented history itself from being rewritten. Now they would return to shape a future worthy of that victory. The Contemplalia Observatory materialized above Nexus Prime in a spectacular display of dimensional phase shifting, ancient crystalline architecture briefly superimposed across multiple probability states before settling into conventional reality. Its arrival created momentary panic throughout the capital until Imperial identification codes confirmed the Emperor's presence aboard the structure. The political situation they returned to was complex but manageable. In their absence, Counselor Albedo's contingency protocols had maintained basic governmental functions despite attempted coups by several factions. The dynasty forces that had blockaded the capital withdrew following the destruction of the Continuum engine. Their alliance with the Chronos Collective dissolving without Vilgax Reborn's unifying influence. The Privy Council convened an emergency session upon Decimus's return. demanding explanations for everything from the Emperor's unexpected departure to the appearance of an ancient Contemlia observatory in capital orbit. What followed was a diplomatic masterclass as Dec. Imus presented his unlikely companions not as former enemies or assassination threats, but as crucial allies who had helped prevent temporal disaster. The Nexus Dominion stands at a crossroads, he told the assembled counselors. For too long, we have focused inward, allowing internal politics to divide us while external threats gathered. The Chronos Collective, Siphon's dynasty, the Void Architects, all exploited our fragmentation. He gestured to his companions, each standing with quiet dignity despite the suspicious glances from various counselors. These representatives from civilizations we have historically viewed as adversaries proved themselves essential allies in our moment of greatest vulnerability. Their specialized knowledge and capabilities complemented our own, creating a synergy that succeeded where isolated effort would have failed. Pretty words, Emperor, said the Petrosapian counselor skeptically. But they do not change the fact that you allied with the Incursine remnant that has raided our border worlds for decades, or the Tetraman Reformation that has consistently challenged our authority. Challenge improves us, Decimus countered. Conflict can be productive when channeled toward mutual growth rather than dominance. What exactly are you proposing, Emperor? Albedo asked, his tone neutral but eyes keenly interested. A transformation of the Nexus Dominion, Decimus stated boldly. Not an empire imposed through force and control, but a genuine confederation of allied worlds with shared purpose and mutual respect. The Incursine remnant, the Tetram, and Reformation, these should not be adversaries but partners in galactic stability. His proclamation created immediate uproar among the counselors, precisely as he had anticipated. While the debate raged, Decimus met the eyes of each of his companions in turn, a silent acknowledgement of the journey ahead. This was merely the beginning of a longer process, reimagining an empire as something more equitable and sustainable. In the weeks that followed, Decimus implemented sweeping reforms throughout the Dominion. True to his word, he granted the Tetraman Reformation full representation in the reconstituted Senate. With Looma appointed as their first ambassador, her combination of traditional warrior values and progressive governance philosophy made her uniquely qualified to bridge cultural divides. The Incursine remnant received formal recognition and protected status within Dominion space. Attea, reinstated as legitimate empress of her people, negotiated trade agreements and mutual defense pacts that benefited both civilizations. Her cybernetic enhancements, permanently modified by Xylene's crystalline integration, gave her unique temporal perception abilities that proved valuable in diplomatic forecasting. Xylene herself chose to remain within the Dominion as a temporal advisor, her crystalline consciousness serving as both guide and warning system against further chronological manipulation. The Contemlia Observatory became her primary residence, positioned at the system's edge where it could monitor dimensional stability across multiple sectors simultaneously. Eunice accepted Ted appointment as director of the newly established Evolutionary Technologies Division, focusing on beneficial applications of the genetic engineering principles previously restricted to imperial projects. Her unique perspective as an evolved synthetic being brought fresh approaches to challenges ranging from environmental restoration to medical advancement. Perhaps most surprisingly, Myaxx transitioned from imperial scientist to personal advisor, working closely with Decimus on integrating Contemlia-derived technology with existing Dominion infrastructure. Their professional relationship evolved alongside their personal connection, her analytical brilliance complementing his hybrid perspective in ways that benefited them both. 6 months after their return from the Void Sector, Decimus stood on the observation platform of the Imperial Palace, watching the sunset illuminate Nexus Prime's spectacular cityscape. The capital had transformed along with the Dominion itself, formerly Melita. Ristic architecture softened by newly integrated green spaces, traffic patterns redesigned for efficiency rather than imperial pageantry, and cultural centers celebrating diverse traditions from across member worlds. Admiring your handiwork, came Attea's voice from behind him. The Incursine Empress approached with her characteristic confident stride, her formal diplomatic attire contrasting with her naturally sardonic expression. Observing progress, Decimus corrected, smiling as she joined him at the railing. The Southern District renovations are proceeding ahead of schedule. The benefits of not having to build everything to withstand orbital bombardment, she noted dryly. Peace has its practical advantages. Indeed it does. He turned to face her fully. How are the negotiations? With the Arachnochimp Confederation progressing? Attea's cybernetic eye flashed with calculations before she responded. Better than predicted. They're cautious, naturally, given historical tensions with both Incursines and the Dominion. But the temporal trade route proposal caught their interest. She smirked. Turns out even suspicious spider monkeys can't resist the prospect of shipping goods through chronological shortcuts. Your diplomatic skills continue to impress, Decimus observed genuinely. Don't sound so surprised, she countered, though without real offense. I spent 50 years in exile planning how I'd rebuild the Incursine Empire if given the chance. This Confederation approach is, she hesitated, searching for words. Different from what I imagined. Better, probably. Before he could respond, Looma arrived at the observation platform, her impressive tetraman form adorned with the formal regalia of her ambassador position, traditional warrior decorations seamlessly integrated with diplomatic insignia. Emperor, she greeted formally, then relaxed into a more familiar tone. Attea, interrupting diplomatic flirtation, am I? Diplomatic assessment, Attea corrected, her tongue flicking out in amusement. Though I won't deny enjoying the Emperor's company outside official functions. Looma laughed, the sound rich and genuine. As do many of us, it seems. She turned to Decimus. The Tetraman Assembly has ratified the Mutual Defense Treaty. 27 worlds formerly under Reformation influence are now officially Confederate partners rather than adversarial neighbors. That's excellent news, Decimus acknowledged. Your leadership made this possible, Looma. The transition could have been confrontational rather than cooperative. Honor finds expression in many forms. She replied thoughtfully. My ancestors understood only the honor of combat victory. I've learned there is equal honor in building alliances that prevent unnecessary conflict. A smile touched her four-eyed face. Though I still enjoy a good fight when appropriate. Speaking of fights, came Myaxx's voice as she joined them, datapad in hand. The Senate debate on expansion protocols nearly devolved into one today. The Petrosapian delegation remains resistant to incorporating more non-crystalline worlds into the Confederate leadership structure. Change comes slowly to species with thousand-year lifespans. Decimus noted wryly. We'll continue the dialogue. As they discussed ongoing political developments, Eunice and Xylene arrived together, a study in contrasts with EU. Nice's synthetic humanoid form beside Xylene's flowing crystalline matrix. Yet they had developed a unique friendship based on their shared experience as evolved beings outside conventional biological parameters. The observatory has detected interesting dimensional ripples in the Andromeda galaxy, Xylene reported, her harmonics conveying both concern and scientific interest. Nothing immediately threatening, but worth monitoring. My division can adapt the new sensor array to extend our detection range, Eunice offered. The genetic interface technology we've developed has applications for dimensional monitoring as well. Decimus looked at the 5 women gathered around him, former enemies and reluctant allies transformed into something far more significant. Each had found her place in T. He knew Confederate structure while maintaining her unique identity and purpose. Their relationships, with him and with each other, had evolved beyond political necessity into genuine connection. I'd like to propose something, he said after a moment of contemplation. Not as emperor to diplomatic partners, but as Decimus to friends. The word seemed inadequate, but it would serve for now. That sounds ominous, Attea remarked. Though her expression showed interest rather than concern. The Confederate structure is stabilizing, Decimus continued. Political reforms are proceeding effectively. Perhaps it's time to address a more personal matter. Your consciousness integration, Myaxx identified immediately. You've achieved complete synchronization between Ben Tennyson's memories and Emperor Decimus's identity. He nodded. I'm neither fully Ben nor entirely Decimus anymore. I've become someone new, someone who honors both legacies while forging a different path. And this personal matter involves us how exactly? Looma asked directly. Decimus smiled, appreciating her characteristic straightforwardness. The traditional imperial structure included certain expectations regarding dynastic continuity and political marriages. I've eliminated those outdated requirements from the Confederate Charter, but you're considering personal relationships outside political obligation, Eunice completed for him. Her synthetic features displaying perfect understanding. And given your unique nature, conventional approaches seem insufficient. Precisely, he acknowledged. Each of you has become important to me in ways that transcend political alliance or even friendship. Different connections with different foundations, yet equally meaningful. Attea's tongue flicked out thoughtfully. Are you proposing what I think you're proposing, Emperor? Because interscene relationship structures are notoriously complex. As are Tetraman bonding traditions, Looma added, though. Her tone suggested interest rather than objection. I'm proposing nothing specific yet, Decimus clarified. Merely opening a conversation about possibilities. About creating something as innovative in personal terms as what we've built politically. Relationships based on mutual respect, complementary strengths, and genuine connection rather than convention or obligation. A moment of thoughtful silence followed his words, each woman considering the implications from her unique perspective. It was Xylene who finally spoke, her crystalline form shifting in patterns that suggested amusement. You always did approach problems from unexpected angles, Ben, she observed, using his original name deliberately. Whether as human hero or hybrid emperor, you find paths others overlook. Is that approval? He asked, genuinely uncertain. It's recognition, she clarified, of your consistent nature across transformations. And yes, her harmonics softened, personal interest in exploring unconventional possibilities. One by one, the others expressed similar sentiments, each in her characteristic manner. Attea with sardonic humor masking genuine emotion. Looma with forthright assessment of honorable possibilities. Eunice with thoughtful analysis of complementary connections. Myaxx with scientific precision applied to emotional complexity. As sunset gave way to the spectacular stellar display visible from Nexus Prime. They remained on the observation platform, their conversation evolving from political strategy to personal philosophy to shared experiences that had forged their unlikely bonds. The future they discussed was as unprecedented as the confederation they were building, a network of relationships as diverse and complementary as their individual abilities. For Decimus, it represented the final integration of his dual nature. Ben Tennyson had always formed connections with others, finding strength in friendship and alliance. Emperor Decimus had maintained distance, seeing relationships primarily in strategic terms. The being he had become honored both perspectives while transcending their limitations, capable of deep personal connection while respecting each individual's autonomy and purpose. The Nexus Confederation would continue to evolve, as would the relationships forming at its center. But the foundation had been established, both politically and personally, based on principles stronger and more sustainable than the empire that preceded it. As stars emerged across the night sky above Nexus Prime, Decimus stood surrounded by 5 extraordinary women who had once been enemies, then allies. And now something far more complex and meaningful. Different paths had brought them together. Different futures might await them. But in this moment, their connection represented something powerful and unprecedented, a harmony of contrasting natures united by shared purpose and genuine affection. The hero who had sacrificed everything to save reality. The emperor who had governed through calculation rather than compassion. The hybrid being who combined their strengths while transcending their limitations. All were part of him now, integrated into something greater than any could have been alone. And as he looked at the women who had helped make this transformation possible, each bringing her unique perspective and abilities to both conflict and resolution, he felt profound gratitude for the second chance he had never expected to receive. The universe had given Ben Tennyson rebirth as Emperor Decimus. Together with these remarkable allies, he would ensure that GIFT served purposes worthy of both his past and future. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.